Lu Chen. I advise you to save your energy. Lin Yan's voice wasn't loud, but it was like a scalpel sharpened with ice, precisely slicing through the oppressive atmosphere of the courtroom. Today, she wore a crisp navy blue suit skirt with the gold lawyer's badge symbolizing her top-tier status in the industry pinned to her collar. Her hair was meticulously styled in a bun revealing her smooth forehead and her eyes, which were now devoid of warmth. She didn't even look at me directly, but merely tapped the forensic report spread out on the table with her gloved fingertips, her movements as elegant as if she were directing an insignificant performance. I jerked my hands off the large hands that were gripping my shoulders from behind, yanked on the tie that was choking my neck, and roared at the judge's bench. I didn't do it. Lin Yan. Look at me. Those transfer records are fake, and that bed photo is utter nonsense. Are you fucking bewitched? A few suppressed chuckles came from the audience, like needles pricking the skin, a subtle, stinging pain. Lin Yan finally raised her head, her gaze sweeping over them. There was not a trace of affection from their 3 years of marriage, only naked, undisguised disgust, as if she were looking at a pile of repulsive garbage. The evidence is conclusive. Stubborn resistance will only worsen your sentence. She turned her head, her tone instantly switching to professional coldness, and nodded slightly to the presiding judge. Your Honor, the defense has submitted 2 sets of supplementary evidence before the trial regarding the defendant Lu Chen's alleged infringement of my client Shin's group's trade secrets and malicious transfer of our marital property. Especially this set of so-called intimate photos of infidelity. After comparison and pixel-level analysis by authoritative technical departments, there are no traces of Photoshop manipulation. On the contrary, that the defendant's attempt to fabricate debts has been fully refuted on page 7 of the 3rd set of evidence. I stared intently at her, my heart feeling like it was being gripped tightly by an invisible hand. Even my breath tasted blood. The photo showed me shirtless, on top of a long-haired woman. But I swear that I rarely even attend drinking parties. How could I have had the chance to do this? For the past 3 months, she'd used the excuse of needing time to repair our relationship to lock me in that desolate villa, forbidding me from leaving except to buy groceries. I was like a kept, useless piece of trash. Lin Yan, that night you were in the study revising the contract all night, and I was on the sofa in the living room with you. You can check the community's security camera footage, or ask the housekeeper. Sisterly, she can prove I was home all night. I tried to grasp at this last straw, my voice trembling with despair. Sisterly resigned and went back to her hometown after receiving her salary last week, and I can't contact her. Lin Yan interrupted me, a mocking smile curving her lips, a smile that was delicate yet cold. As for the community's surveillance cameras, the storage hard drive was accidentally burned out during your home renovation, and all the data was destroyed. Lu Chen. Even lying has its basic rules. Your farcical act only makes you look ridiculous. Bang! The judge struck the gavel, his authoritative voice echoing in the courtroom. Defendant. Abide by court discipline. The electronic data. Financial statements and expert opinions submitted by the plaintiff have been reviewed by the collegial panel and found to be a complete and authentic chain of evidence. Therefore, this court accepts them. Your current objections lack factual basis and are therefore rejected. I refuse to admit it. I absolutely refuse to admit it. My eyes were red, and I lunged forward like a trapped beast, only to be pinned down by the prepared bailiffs. My elbows were twisted behind my back, and excruciating pain shot through me. Lin Yan, why did you do this? Just because that bastard Shen Zhixing is back? Are you going to trample me into the mud to clear the way for him? The entire courtroom fell into a deathly silence. The air seemed to freeze. All eyes were fixed on Lin Yan, filled with curiosity, inquiry, and a hint of barely perceptible disdain. Lin Yan's perfect, sculpted face stiffened for a fleeting moment, but only for a fraction of a second before she regained her haughty indifference. She stood up and strode professionally to me, looking down at me across the edge of the judge's bench. She leaned closer, and I, in a voice only the two of us could hear, said word by word, Lu Chen, who do you think you are, daring to mess with him? My head buzzed as if I'd been hit by a heavy hammer. Shen Zhixing, her first love and ex-husband. That bastard who ruined 2 partner companies 3 years ago due to financial problems. then absconded with the money and disappeared without a trace, only to return last month as an overseas returnee elite. So that's how it is. No wonder she's been using overtime as an excuse to stay out all night lately. And no wonder she's been getting more and more impatient with me. And no wonder she completely kicked me out of the decision-making circle the moment I objected to her taking over Sean's obviously problematic acquisition. She told me I didn't understand the business and shouldn't hold her back. Everything.is for today. You're going to ruin me for him? My voice was hoarse, and it felt like I had blood in my throat, making it difficult to even swallow. Lin Yin straightened up, slowly and deliberately adjusting her perfectly wrinkle-free cuffs. Her tone was as indifferent as if she were stating what was for dinner. It's your own stupidity to insist on checking Shin's accounts, and even trying to touch the cake you shouldn't have. Admitting your guilt is the greatest blessing you can have. Otherwise, she paused, a glint of ruthlessness flashing in her eyes, that I wouldn't mind letting you stay in there until your hair turns gray. The verdict is as follows. The judge's voice is not to be questioned. Defendant Lu Chun is found guilty of infringing trade secrets and sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, suspended for 2 years, and immediately taken into custody. The illicit gains involved in the case are to be recovered and returned to the victimized company. Shin's group. Of the marital property, Lu Chin's share will be used to offset the compensation, and the remaining portion will be divided. I could barely hear what they said after that. A deafening roar exploded in my ears. I was roughly lifted up by 2 strong bailiffs, the cold metallic feel of the handcuffs pressed against my wrists. I turned around and stared intently at Lin Yan. She had her back to me, head down, intently tidying up the case files on the table. Her profile was as cold and hard as iron, without a trace of lingering affection or remorse. In the first row of the audience section, Shun Jixing sat with his legs crossed, swirling a cup of coffee he'd somehow gotten his hands on. When he saw me looking at him, he raised his cup and made a toasting gesture across the crowd, a smug smile on his face that was so blinding I wanted to gouge my own eyes out. At that moment, all the anger, resentment, and bitterness subsided, turning into a deathly, cold silence. This was not a misunderstanding, not an impulsive act. It was a premeditated, meticulously planned hunt. The two of them, this former couple, had woven a web together, and I was the insect waiting to be devoured. The police car that transported me was sealed, with only a few rays of light letting in through a small ventilation window. The handcuffs were digging painfully into my wrists, but I couldn't feel them. I closed my eyes, forcing myself to calm down. Lin Yan, did you think you had done everything perfectly? Did you think I would be inside like a stray dog, tugging at the wall and barely surviving? You are wrong. Lu Chun have been a certified public accountant for 10 years, specializing in financial auditing and fraud investigation. What kind of fake accounts haven't I seen? You, Lin Yan, think you can destroy me with just a few legal statutes and litigation skills? I began to rapidly replay the evidence I had seen in court in my mind. The crucial financial records appeared flawless on the surface. Every expenditure had a corresponding contract and invoice copy. However, I remembered that the Shun Group had always used an outdated coding system, habitually using specific letter abbreviations to indicate the nature of funds in the remarks column. While Lin Yan had imitated the format of the remark codes for the large outflows of funds, one letter at the end was misspelled. Such a detail would be impossible to notice unless one was constantly dealing with numbers. And then there's that damning bed photo. Lin Yan said that after technical analysis, there were no signs of Photoshop manipulation. True that the photo itself might be real, but what about the background? I saw the pattern on the hotel curtains in a picture of a celebration banquet that Shun Jixing posted on his WeChat Moments last month. The most ridiculous thing is that the woman in the photo has a tiny black mole on her right earlobe, and I checked the list of women Shun Jixing has been in contact with in the last 6 months. One of them is a newly promoted public relations manager, and their features match perfectly. This isn't infidelity at all. It's a complete staged photo and a frame-up. The web they wove for me seemed impenetrable, but it was actually full of loopholes. These loopholes were just too subtle and sophisticated to be noticed in the fast-paced courtroom proceedings. Even I, in the midst of that immense shock, almost overlooked them. 3 months. The verdict was a 2-year suspended sentence, but being taken into custody in court means I'll lose at least a few months of my freedom. But those few months are enough. I need to think carefully about how to turn these loopholes into sharp knives aimed at their hearts. Lin Yin, aren't you a master of scheming? Shen Jixing, aren't you adept at disguise? I will expose your fabricated accounts point one by one. I will tear apart the evidence you've forged piece by piece. I will collect exactly 317 pieces of evidence, in o more, in o less. Just enough to nail you two demons in human skin to the pillar of shame. The car drove through the bustling city center, shutting out the noise from outside the window, leaving only the roar of the engine. Sunlight filtered through the iron bars of the windows, casting interlaced shadows on the ground, much like the bars of a prison cell. I licked the wound on the corner of my mouth, a scratch from the bailiff's equipment during my struggle, and tasted the strong metallic rust. It tastes bitter, but it's also very refreshing. I leaned against the cold car wall, a vast network of relationships and a timeline already forming in my mind. Lin Yin, you wait. Shen Jixing, you wait too. The humiliation you've inflicted on me today, I'll make you pay for it with your whole lives. Just as the car made a sharp turn, I seemed to touch a tiny hard object in a corner of my pocket that I thought was empty. It was a small USB flash drive clip that I had kept in the inside pocket of my suit jacket, which I usually use to temporarily hang my keys on. During the pretrial search, IT was probably overlooked because it was so small and had been mixed in with the seams of my clothes. Without making a sound, I hooked it with my finger, feeling the slight, insignificant metallic sensation. Heaven has not forsaken me. This game of chess has only just begun. And Lu Chun, will never be a pawn to be manipulated. The iron gate slammed against me from behind, not with a clang, but with a dull thud, like a boulder falling into mud. The air smelled of mold mixed with cheap bleach, and a greasy, sweaty odor. I was pushed into a small room of less than 5 square meters, which contained nothing but a squat toilet in the corner and a concrete bed. Light streamed in through a tiny ventilation window above the door, leaving a pale trail on the floor. I sat on the hard, cold concrete, the bruises from the handcuffs on my wrists still throbbing, but my head ached even more. Lin Yan's words, "You dare mess with him?" were like a rusty nail, repeatedly hammering into my temples. Anger was useless, and feeling wronged was a luxury. I'd been a certified public accountant for 10 years, dealing exclusively with numbers and rules. Now I had to use that same logic to dismantle the trap my wife had set for me. I closed my eyes, forcing myself into a state of absolute calm, if facing an annual financial report that needed auditing. The chain of evidence Lin Yin submitted seemed flawless in the fast-paced courtroom confrontation. But a lie is still a lie, especially financial fraud. As long as you follow the flow of funds, you can always find the thread. I started by reviewing the core charge, the embezzlement of 8 million yuan. The electronic receipt Lin Yin presented was a perfect imitation, mimicking the format, watermark, seal placement, and even the font spacing. But I zoomed in on that image in my mind, focusing on the remarks section. Shen Jixing's company had an extremely outdated internal financial system, but a rigid rule that had been in place for over a decade. The first 3 digits of the remarks code for all corporate transfers had to be capitalized as SFX, taken from the initials of Shun Family External, their family business's internal risk control identifier. On the courtroom's large screen, the code on that receipt began with SFX. Only the second letter differed in capitalization. To outsiders, this might just be a typo during data entry. But to me, it's a fatal flaw. The outdated accounting software at Shun's uses a system-wide logic that automatically generates annotation codes when exporting data. These codes are designed to prevent mixed capitalization. The only explanation is that this receipt wasn't exported from the system, but rather forged manually. And the only person who could access Shun's internal accounting template and know to use the SFX prefix, besides Shun's Ixing.is Lin Yin, who has practically lived in Shun Jixing's office for the past 3 months. Next came the bed photo. Lin Yin confidently claimed that it had undergone authoritative technical authentication and showed no signs of Photoshop manipulation. This was a classic logical trap. It only proved that the image itself hadn't been pixel forged, but it didn't prove the content of the photo was authentic. I clearly remembered the subtle pattern on the curtains in the background of the photo, It was a custom-made design exclusive to the presidential suite at the Hentang International Hotel, with a lotus pattern and specific patterns in the direction of the petal's notches. Just a week before the incident, Shun Jixing posted a picture on his WeChat moments of a toast in the banquet hall of Hentang International. And the curtain pattern that flashed briefly in the background was exactly the same as the one in the bed photo. This indicated that the bed photo was likely taken at Hentang International. Or even in that suite. As for my body and that woman's body, that it's entirely possible that they were taken separately and then composited using green screen technology. With today's film-level compositing technology, that it's too easy to achieve a flawless result without Photoshop manipulation. As long as the image source isn't reused, ordinary authentication procedures would have difficulty identifying it. Lin Yan's deliberate emphasis on the lack of Photoshop manipulation seemed to be guiding the judge away from a deeper examination of the composite background of the photo. And then there was that woman, the mole on her right earlobe. A while ago, I was auditing a media company, and while looking through their employee profile, a new PR manager caught my attention. It wasn't because she was beautiful, but because of the mole on her earlobe, the same shape and location as the one in the bedroom photo. And according to industry rumors, this PR manager was Shun Jixing's latest kept woman. One thing leads to another. Forging financial evidence, fabricating a sex scandal, and then Lin Yan using her professional authority to subtly influence the judge in court. It was indeed a combination of blows that could have utterly destroyed me. But they were too confident, so confident that they couldn't even be bothered to fix such a minor flaw. Or rather, they were certain that I would be thrown into disarray by the sudden blow and wouldn't have time to pay attention to these details. I slowly opened my eyes, looking at the cramped cell before me. There was no computer, no calculator, not even a pen. But I had my brain. Over the past 10 years, the accounts I'd handled could fill several warehouses. My sensitivity to numbers had become a primal instinct. Lin Yan and Shun Jixing thought that depriving me of my freedom would sever my chance to fight back. They were wrong. Here, without external interference, without the temptations of a glittering nightlife, this was precisely my best battlefield. I could, like a precise instrument, dismantle their conspiracy without a single distraction. For the next few days, I acted like a complete failure. I ate the fastest, worked the hardest, never looked up at anyone, and never spoke. But my brain was working at high speed. I used my half-hour break each day to quietly observe the people here. This place was a melting pot of all sorts of people. I needed someone knowledgeable, someone who could help me verify certain hypotheses on a technical level. The opportunity arose after lunch on the third day. A fight broke out in the next cell over a piece of fatty meat, and a middle-aged man named Old Joe was transferred to my cell. Old Joe was in there for forging financial documents and had reportedly been there for 2 years. He spoke very little and spent most of his time resting with his eyes closed. But when he occasionally opened them, a shrewd and worldly wise look shone through. I decided to take a risk. That evening after dinner, while the guards had just finished their rounds, I approached Old Joe and asked in a very low voice, "Uncle Joe, when you were dealing with banknotes before, was the digital signature on the new electronic bank receipts difficult to forge?" Old Joe didn't even lift his eyelids, replying in a muffled voice, "Fake my foot. A legitimate bank's PDF, if you right-click and select properties, clearly shows the issuing institution and encryption algorithm. This thing doesn't exist. It's just an image, good for fooling laymen." My heart skipped a beat. This was exactly the answer I needed. I continued, lowering my voice. What if the photos? They look real, but the people were actually photographed separately? Old Joe lifted his eyelids slightly, glanced at me, seemingly weighing the weight of my words, and after a few seconds slowly said, "Now everyone's using AI, but those kinds of bedroom photos, they probably don't have that kind of technology yet. Most likely it's green screen keying, filmed in a reasonably decent room. It's easy to spot, look at the shadows, the reflections, and the degree of background blur. Anyone with a little knowledge can tell it's fake. Green screen keying. Background blurred." Old Joe's words were like a key, unlocking another door to my thinking. I stopped talking and just silently took notes. I knew that what I needed to verify was becoming clearer and clearer. I began to construct a detailed counterattack list in my mind. First, I had to obtain the original document of the electronic receipt submitted by Lin Yan and verify its digital signature certificate. Second, that I needed to obtain a real-life photo of the suite at Hentang International and compare the perspective and lighting angles of the bed photos. Third, that I needed to find out the exact whereabouts of the PR manager with the mole on his earlobe on the day of the photo shoot. Each of these points requires solid evidence, and that evidence is currently in the hands of Lin Yin and Shun Jixing. But I am not pessimistic. Since they have gone to such lengths to imprison me, they will surely lower their guard in the short term and think I am already trapped. And I will use this 3-month vacuum period to tear this net apart from the inside, point one by one. By day, I lived my life in silence as usual. But at night, lying on the hard concrete slab, I was unusually lucid. I began to mentally reconstruct the financial statements of the Shin Group. Based on my memory of Shun Jixing's company's business model, cost structure, and the funds Lin Yin might have recently used, I deduced their potential tax loopholes and money laundering methods. I knew that Lin Yin would inevitably manipulate the accounts to help Shun Jixing launder those shady funds. And such manipulation would certainly leave traces. I even started recalling the unusual details of Lin Yan's behavior during this period. She began frequently using a new encrypted email address, immediately deleting the records after each email was sent or received. She would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and make phone calls from the balcony. Her voice extremely low, but I vaguely heard words like offshore and architecture. Another time, I accidentally saw a document open on her tablet, the title of which seemed to be Cross-Border Asset Protection Plan. Although she quickly switched screens, I remembered the naming. Format. These fragmented pieces of information automatically pieced together in my mind, pointing to a more terrifying possibility. Lin Yan's help to Shun Jixing was not merely out of old feelings or being manipulated. She was likely a deep participant, even a beneficiary. Her framing of me might not have been just to avoid offending Shun Jixing, but also to silence me to protect herself from the murky waters in which she was also deeply involved. The thought sent chills down my spine, but it also filled me with immense excitement. If that were the case, I wouldn't be dealing with a simple false accusation, but a massive, intricate criminal network. And the larger the network, the more nodes it has, the higher the risk of it collapsing. I began mentally filling in the list of 317 documents. Document 001. Analysis report on the digital signature of the forged bank electronic receipt. Document 002. Comparative analysis of light and shadow between the background of the bed photo and the actual view of the Hentang International Suite. Document 003. Proof of the public relations manager's publicly disclosed activity trajectory during the time of the incident. It felt like I was compiling an extremely detailed audit procedure checklist, striving for precision in every step and every piece of evidence. I know that mental deduction alone isn't enough. I need external information input. But I'm a prisoner now. How can I contact the outside world? Fatty Chin. My only college classmate who still answers the phone. Is my only hope. But I can't contact him directly. Any unusual communication will be monitored and recorded. I need to send a signal that only he can understand. I've come up with an idea. Fatty Chin knows that before I went to prison, I was self-studying an extremely obscure subject of ancient Latin, purely out of personal interest. I could use a small pebble I picked up during exercise time to carve the word veritas, meaning truth, in the corner of the concrete bed. This word is uncommon, and if Fatty Chun comes to see me, or has the opportunity to see my detention environment, he might interpret it as me hinting at his search for the truth. It's just a faint hope, but it's the only thing I can do right now. Time slipped away in monotonous repetition. During my daily exercise time, I no longer just walked with my head down. I began consciously memorizing the guard's patrol patterns, observing the height of the fence and the gaps in the electric fence. I wasn't trying to escape. That was too foolish. I simply needed to understand the rules of this environment so that I could more safely relay messages when necessary. One night, I was awakened by old Joe's coughing next door. By the moonlight streaming through the ventilation window, I saw him sit up, pull a crumpled piece of cigarette paper from a crack in the bed frame, write something on it, and then stuff it back in. The action was extremely discreet, but I happened to be awake and saw it clearly. A thought flashed through my mind. Old Joe had been in there for 2 years. He must have his own channels for passing information. Perhaps I could make a deal with him. Not with money, but with my professional knowledge. He knew how to forge documents. I knew how to audit accounts. If he needed to prepare for a reduced sentence or appeal, my auditing and analytical skills would be invaluable to him. I've decided to test him tomorrow. I lay back on the bed. Heart pounding uncontrollably. 317 documents. It was a massive undertaking. But with each piece of information I pieced together, each piece of evidence I confirmed, that I felt I was one step closer to the truth. Lin Yand, oh, you think you're a judge with the power of life and death? No, you're just a suspected fraudster among my audit targets. And this time I'm going to issue an audit report that will condemn you to eternal damnation. I closed my eyes, and instead of darkness, I saw countless pulsating numbers, codes, and file names. Like a spider weaving its web in the dark, I patiently and precisely awaited the pre-dawn counterattack. I lost the opening move in this game of chess, but now it's my turn to make my move. And the pieces in my hand hold a logic and truth you can never imagine. Old Joe's action of stuffing the cigarette box back became my way of breaking the silence. The next day, before the end of exercise time, I deliberately lagged behind the line. As I passed him, I whispered in a low voice. Bill of exchange endorsement, consecutive signatures, point one missed. Old Joe didn't stop walking, nor did he even lift his eyelids, but I saw his hand hanging at his side, his knuckles curling almost imperceptibly. That was the only professional flaw I could decipher among the string of scribbles he had drawn with chalk against the wall yesterday while he was picking up pebbles. In his simulated sample of a forged document, the endorsement seal was positioned half an inch off-center at a fatal flaw that would absolutely fail the inspection of a professional seal verification system. That night, after the lights were turned off, the darkness was as thick as ink. Old Joe's voice suddenly came from the bed next to mine, as low as a mosquito's buzz. You know this? There was no question, only confirmation. I replied in a low voice, 10 years of auditing, specializing in this. A long silence followed, broken only by the controlled breathing of the two of us in the small space. Finally, Old Joe spoke again, a barely perceptible softening in his voice. That 8 million account, you really didn't touch it? The transaction history is fake, I said bluntly. The notes have incorrect capitalization. The system can't export that format. The receipt is a photoshopped image, without a digital signature. I felt the bed frame vibrate slightly. He was turning over. How did you know it was photoshopped? He asked, this time with a hint of inquiry. I briefly explained the lighting angles and the details of the cloud-top international curtains. A few minutes later, he uttered 2 words. That's ruthless. At that moment, a crack appeared in the wall of vigilance between us. It wasn't trust, but a professional resonance. He understood the techniques of forgery, I understood the methods of verification, and we both knew that the scheme Lin Yin and Shun Jixing had orchestrated was riddled with flaws under professional scrutiny. Old Joe needed my expertise to help him refine his prison skills, even to leave a way out for a future retrial. I needed his connections and insights to transmit information and verify suspicions in this closed environment. A silent alliance based on an exchange of interests was thus formed. In the days that followed, we remained silent, but subtle changes began to occur. He would occasionally drop scraps of paper covered in symbols beside my bed, and I would, under the cover of darkness, use my fingernails to carve brief analyses of the anti-counterfeiting features of the documents into the cement slab. I learned that he had a distant nephew living elsewhere who would send letters monthly. Although all letters were inspected, it wasn't impossible for him to slip in a few words. In exchange, I helped him understand a more complex counterfeiting process, highlighting several of the latest anti-counterfeiting inks and paper fiber characteristics, things I had just learned in training before my imprisonment, which was undoubtedly a technological upgrade for him. Meanwhile, my mental list of 317 documents grew increasingly comprehensive. Number 004. A summary table of abnormal notes and codes in all bank statements of the Shun Group over the past year. Number 005. A compliance analysis of all legal documents handled by Lin Yin concerning the transfer of assets of Shun Jixing's company. I began to recall Lin Yan's whereabouts over the past 6 months, her late-night phone calls, encrypted emails, and the cross-border asset protection plan document flashing on her tablet, all pointed to one possibility. She was not just a lawyer, but a key link in Shun Zhixing's gray money chain. This conjecture sent chills down my spine and made me even more certain that I was not facing a simple frame-up, but a huge, far-reaching black hole of interests. To uncover it, I needed more solid evidence, especially clues about that offshore company. An opportunity suddenly presented itself one afternoon. That day, two new prisoners were fighting over a water pipe in the exercise yard. One of them was pushed and shoved against the wall, loosening a weathered brick and revealing a rusty iron box behind it. The guards were busy controlling the situation, and old Joe nudged me with his toad, gesturing for me to look. In the chaos, I was closest to the hole in the wall. Almost instinctively, I quickly bent down, pretending to tie my shoelaces, and casually moved the iron box to my feet, then covered it with my trouser leg. The whole process took less than 2 seconds, and no one noticed. Back in my cell, when no one was looking, I opened the metal box. Inside, besides a few yellowed old newspapers, was a small, long discontinued SIM card and a folded note with a string of numbers and a name's initials written in pencil, CS. Chimpanzee's initials were indeed CS, and this string of numbers was very likely a password or key fragment for some encrypted email account. This metal box, hidden by some predecessor, had somehow ended up in my hands. Was this fate? I clutched the SIM card and the note tightly in my hand until my palm ached. This was the key to the outside world. But I couldn't act rashly. Everything here was under surveillance. Any unusual movement would alert them. I needed to wait for the right opportunity, an opportunity that could reasonably explain how I obtained this information and how I could pass it on. This opportunity arose a week later in the form of an unexpected act of merit. That day, the prison organized a viewing of a legal education video, which analyzed cases of financial fraud. When the screen showed a close-up of a forged bill, I suddenly stood up, pointed at the screen, and shouted, "Report." In this case, the fluorescent fibers in the lower right corner of the fake bill in frame 17 are unevenly distributed. It was printed later. Genuine bills have randomly distributed fibers. All eyes instantly focused on me, and even the guards were stunned. In prison, being proactive and pointing out mistakes is a typical way to seek leniency. My sudden insight and professional knowledge were recorded, becoming proof that I had genuinely repented and actively assisted the prison staff. Afterwards, during exercise time, Lao Zhou whispered, "Are you crazy? Taking such a big risk for a metal box?" I replied calmly, "Instead of just lying around waiting, I might as well build a ladder myself." I knew that although this act of merit was minor, it was enough to leave a mark on my file. More importantly, it gave me a legitimate reason to apply for a special meeting, to request a meeting with my lawyer on the grounds of providing important clues about financial crimes. As for the information on that SIM card and the note, I needed Fatty Chun to verify and decipher it. The application was submitted, and the days waiting for approval felt incredibly long. I went about my usual routine of getting some fresh air, eating, and sleeping, but my mind was in turmoil. I repeatedly rehearsed what I should say when I met Fatty Chun, deciding what I could say and what I had to be vague about. I even started using my fingernails to trace the entire chain of evidence on the cement slab, using abbreviations that only I could understand to ensure that even if I couldn't verbally convey all the information, Fatty Chun could piece together the truth from these clues and the information he already had. Finally, in the 7th week after my imprisonment, the visitation notice came. That day, I was taken to a special visiting room, and through the thick glass, I saw a much more haggard-looking chimpanzee. His familiar voice came through the phone receiver. "Lu Chun, you've lost weight." I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down, and said in the fastest and calmest tone, "Fatty, listen, don't ask me why. First, check all the original legal documents that Lin Yin has handled in the last 6 months involving Shun Zhixing's company, focusing on the signature and seal records. Second, find a real picture of Suite 1708 at Yunding International and compare it with the curtain pattern and lighting angle in the bed photo in court. Third, and most importantly, use this key." I quickly recited the numbers on the note to try to decrypt an encrypted compressed file I had previously stored with you. The password was our university dormitory room number. It contained a partial backup of what I had previously suspected of problems with Shun's accounts, but it wasn't enough. You need to trace the flow of funds to an offshore company registered in the British Virgin Islands, whose initials might be LY. The actual controller is very likely related to Lin Yan. Create 317 separate files containing all the evidence to store them in physical segregation and send them regularly to understand. Fatty Chun was clearly stunned by my barrage of information, but he reacted quickly, immediately lowering his voice. Lu Chen. Are you? Are you all right? Lin Yan. She. I interrupted him. Don't ask. Do as I say. I have evidence. But I can't get it out. You are my only way out. Remember point 317 copies. Not one less. Before sending them out. Make sure you are absolutely safe. I paused. Then added the most crucial point. If I can no longer contact you. Then automatically trigger the sending process according to my preset timeline. After saying all that, I hung up the phone, not looking at Fatty Chin's shocked expression again. I knew I had handed him a dangerous spark, but also a map to save himself. Stepping out of the meeting room, my palms were sweaty, but I felt an almost exhausting calm. I had completed a crucial step, sowing the seeds of the 317 materials in my mind into the soil outside. A few days later, the prison informed me that, given my good attitude in admitting guilt, my meritorious service, Chen Pengzi's use of connections to prove that there were significant doubts about my involvement in the case, and my physical condition being unsuitable for detention, my parole application was approved. The day I walked through that heavy iron gate, the sunlight was so bright I could barely open my eyes. I didn't go home, nor did I go to see Chen Pengzi. I went directly to that inconspicuous print shop on the outskirts of the city, and using the spare key I had memorized, I opened the corner locker. Inside, besides some photocopies of the original accounts I had hidden before going to prison, there was also a brand new external hard drive. Chen Pengzi had already delivered the first batch of materials. I plugged in the hard drive and stared at the dense files and data on the screen, like watching a weapon take shape. I spent 3 whole days holed up in a print shop cubicle, without eating or drinking, frantically comparing, integrating, and deducing the data on the hard drive with my memories, the technical details of my conversations with Lao Zhou, and the clues on that piece of paper. More and more of the evidence was closing in. Lin Yan not only fabricated evidence to frame me, but she also used her position as a lawyer to set up a complex offshore structure for Shun Jixing, helping to transfer and conceal assets, and even directly participating in profit sharing. The offshore company called LY was indeed intricately controlled by Lin Yan, and what I had inadvertently touched upon was precisely this core secret. The 317 documents were no longer a vague numbered, but vivid, irrefutable pieces of evidence that could pin them down. I looked at the mountain of printed materials. Each page was like a brick, building a bridge to the path of revenge. I tore up the parole notice, along with the naive and cowardly Lu Chun of the past. Now standing under the dim lights of the print shop was a hunter wielding a sharp blade, his composure utterly chilling. I walked out of the print shop as dusk settled. I carried the heavy travel bag filled with the first batch of prepared copies of evidence, enough to stir up a storm. I didn't look back. Lin Yan, Shun Jixing, that you thought sending me to prison was the end of it? No, that was just the beginning of my long and arduous journey. Now that I'm back, with my 317 documents and a heart tempered into steel, our game has only just begun. And this time, I am the one holding the pieces. I didn't go straight home, or even venture within a 5-kilometer radius of the upscale apartment building Lin Yan and I lived in the city center. I found a cheap hotel behind the long-distance bus station. The neon sign on the hotel sign was missing a few strokes, and at night, it looked like a one-eyed monster. The receptionist was a bald man who always had a cigarette in his mouth and barely acknowledged any of the guests. In places like this, no one would give anyone a second glance, and no one would register their real information. Cash payment and daily settlement were the best way to get around. I stuffed the heavy travel bag under the bedside table and drew the half-painted curtains. The room smelled musty, and the blankets were yellowed, but I didn't care. I turned on the second-hand laptop. The screen's light reflected on my face, cold as ice. The data on the hard drive was decompressing, like a long-dormant beast awakening. Fatty Chun was reliable enough. He not only brought me the copies of the original ledgers I had hidden, but also used web scraping tools to retrieve all of Shun's group's publicly disclosed bidding information, business registration change records, and even press releases from the law firm where Lin Yan worked over the past year. I activated an audit analysis software typically used only by industry professionals that imported Shin Jixing's publicly available financial statements and my recollections of internal accounts and began a thorough investigation. Ordinary accountants look at profits. I look at cash flow. Ordinary auditors look at financial statements. I examine working papers. Lin Yin and Shun Jixing's biggest flaw was their excessive attempt to make this performance appear like normal business activity. My initial focus was on the 200 million yuan overseas technology transfer fee paid by the Shun Group at the end of last year. On paper, this money flowed to an offshore company called Kurutayat, with a flawless contract complete with customs declarations and technology transfer agreements. However, in my software model that the money's return path exhibited strange fluctuations. After leaving the country, the money didn't result in any substantial technology patent registration. Instead, within 72 hours, IT went through 3 different shell companies, circling around before finally ending up in a domestic private equity fund account called Shangtong Capital. While the legal representative of Shangtong Capital was a puppet in his 50s, the actual controller behind it was an investment company controlled by a distant relative of Lin Yan's family. What a masterful maneuver. This isn't some kind of technology transfer. It's a classic case of money laundering and asset transfer. Lin Yan used her legal knowledge to design a perfect closed loop, channeling the Shun Group's money through seemingly legal means into the pockets of her own people. This explains why she went to such lengths to frame me. When I checked the accounts, I already sensed something amiss with these funds. If she didn't eliminate this knowledgeable mole, her entire financial scheme would be exposed. My fingers didn't pause for a moment as I typed, extracting every node in this financial chain. Contract numbered, remittance time, name of the intermediary company, and legal entity relationship diagram. This is the 48th document. Analysis report on the closed-loop return of 200 million yuan technology introduction fee funds of Shun's group and suspected money laundering. Next, I turned my attention to Lin Yin herself. As a top lawyer, her income was extremely high, but her spending habits were suspicious. I retrieved her credit card records from the past 2 years. On the surface, she seemed to be buying designer bags and dining at upscale restaurants, nothing out of the ordinary. But I discovered that every month on the 15th, her supplementary card would make a fixed purchase at a yacht club called Ocean Star. The amount wasn't large, only 20,000 yuan, but it was consistent. And Shun Jixing happened to be one of the club's VIP shareholders. This wasn't just an expense for an affair. It seemed more like a membership fee or protection money. More importantly, this money didn't come from her salary, but was transferred from another anonymous account. The IP address of that anonymous account frequently logged in during her overtime work hours. I scoffed. Lin Yin, you think you're so clever at using anonymous accounts to cover your tracks, but you've forgotten that in the digital world, every connection leaves a trace. By tracing the login logs of that anonymous account, I discovered it had frequent data exchanges with a fixed IP address on Shun Jixing's company's internal network. This means that Lin Yin is not only helping Shun Jixing launder money, she may even be directly and remotely controlling Shun Jixing's company's internal network system. This has crossed the line for lawyers and constitutes the crime of illegally intruding into a computer information system. I packaged these electronic evidence data packets and numbered them as document number 112. Evidence chain of Lin Yan's suspected illegal manipulation of Shun's group intranet and concealment of huge sources of assets. To verify these inferences, I needed to conduct on-site investigations. But I couldn't show my face. I bought an anonymous phone card and dialed a number, the number of a petty thug I knew in the detention center. He was in jail for fighting and owed me a favor. I had helped him analyze his boss's accounts, preventing him from being scammed. I asked him to do a few things. First, scout out the area around Suite 1708 at the Cloud Top International Hotel and take some close-up photos of the curtains. Second, stake out downstairs at Shun Jixing's company and record the license plate numbers of Lin Yan's vehicles entering and leaving, and the vehicles Shun Jixing used to pick her up. Third, go to the entrance of Shangtong Capital's investment company and see if there were any cars belonging to Lin Yan's family. 2 days later, the photos and videos arrived. The curtain pattern in Suite 1708 of Hentang International perfectly matched the background of the bed photo in my mind. Even the direction of the curtain folds was the same. Shen Jixing's car was a black Maybach dot, and I noted the license plate number. And in the parking space downstairs at Shengtong Capital, Lin Yan's sister's red sports car was parked. Evidence is converging from all directions like rivers flowing into the sea. But I know this is all circumstantial evidence. I need direct, irrefutable proof that Lin Yan acted with malicious intent and conspired with him. I thought of Shen Jixing. Someone as extremely arrogant and greedy as him would surely keep accounts that not necessarily in paper ledgers, but perhaps in some kind of encrypted electronic diary or private chat logs between him and Lin Yan. But Shen Jixing's phone and computer have very high security levels. Ordinary people simply cannot access them. I found that thug again. And this time I told him to buy a modified car charger, a trick I learned from a hacker forum. It looks like an ordinary charger, but it actually has a built-in miniature sniffing chip that can intercept Bluetooth signals and Wi-Fi data inside the car. I told him to find an opportunity to replace the charger with this one when Shen Jixing went to get his car washed or serviced. 3 days later, the thug told me the job was done. Another week passed, and the data started coming back. Most of it was Shen Jixing's boring phone calls and music, but one recording made my pupils shrink. That was a conversation between Shen Jixing and Lin Yan in the car. There was road noise in the background, but the sound was clear. Shen Jixing. Is that guy surnamed Liu behaving himself inside? Lin Yan. Don't worry, he's such a coward, he's scared out of his wits. Besides the little bit of debt, he can't cause any trouble. Shen Jixing. That's for the best. Once this round of mergers and acquisitions is completed and the money arrives, you'll be completely free. But Yin Yan, don't you dare have any ulterior motives. Lin Yan. Jixing, I'm your accomplice now that I have no way out. As for Liu Chun, I've made the chain of evidence flawless. He can't overturn the case. But remember that you must transfer control of that offshore company to my name, otherwise I can expose you at any time. Shen Jixing. Give it all away? Do you still want your lawyer's license? You made those fake accounts so well that aren't you afraid of getting yourself implicated? Lin Yan. We're in this together now. Neither of us can survive alone. The recording stopped here. But that was enough. This short 1-minute conversation directly proved Lin Yan's subjective intent to frame me, proved her vested interests in Shen Jixing, and further proved the core fact that she was involved in money laundering. I conducted voice print identification and comparison on this audio, confirming that it was indeed Lin Yan herself. This is document number 199, analysis of the recording and transcription of the secret conversation between Shen Jixing and Lin Yan in the car. By this time, 20 days had passed since my release from prison. My hard drive contained over 200 pieces of evidence, but I showed no sign of stopping. I began using online corporate credit investigation tools to delve into the related companies of the shell companies under Shen Jixing's name. I discovered that one of these companies, Xinyuan Trading, was involved in a state-owned enterprise restructuring loss case from many years ago. This was no longer a simple economic crime. It likely involved deeper historical issues. Following the clues, I found several dusty judgments from that case and compared the legal representative change records of Xinyuan Trading with the signature of Shen Jixing's father. Although the dates were old and handwriting analysis was difficult, the amount of money involved and the flow of funds mentioned in the judgment bore a striking resemblance to the early accounts of the Shun Group that I had found. This is a hidden thread, perhaps not needed for the time being, but it's like a time bomb buried deep within Shen Jixing's foundation. I've numbered it document number 266. Preliminary investigation report on the potential connections between the predecessor of the Shun Group and historical economic cases. Night had fallen, and the roar of trucks echoed outside the cheap hotel window. I rubbed my sore eyes, staring at the densely packed file names on the screen. 317 documents, no longer empty numbers, but bullets I'd honed over countless days and nights with my expertise and hatred. Each one aimed at Lin Yan and Shen Jixing's Achilles heel. But I know that bullets alone aren't enough. I also need a gun and the right moment to pull the trigger. I can't act now. Lin Yan is a lawyer. She understands legal procedures too well. If I rashly present this evidence, she will definitely exploit procedural loopholes to retaliate. or even turn around and accuse me of fabricating evidence. What I need is an occasion where she can't recover and where Shun Jixing completely collapses. I shut down my computer, lay in bed, but couldn't sleep. I thought of Lin Yan's cold gaze in court, and Shun Jixing's smug smile. Did you think I was a fish on a chopping board? Wrong. Now, I am the hunter lurking in the shadows. Every breath you take is ammunition you gather for me. I took out the slip of paper marked 317 and gently stroked it. Only 51 more copies were needed to reach the target. These 51 copies would be the fatal blow to their upcoming grand merger and acquisition signing ceremony. I heard that it was Shun Jixing's final step in laundering all his dirty money, and also the stage for Lin Yan to completely get rid of me and rightfully marry Shun Jixing. Excellent. The stage is set, and the main character is in place. All that's left is to wait for the gong to sound, and then take the stage. I closed my eyes, and my mind began to rehearse the final scene. Lights, applause, champagne, and the gift in my hand, powerful enough to reduce everything to ashes. Lin Yan, Shun Jixing, enjoy your last hurrah, because the next time we meet will be your doomsday. The message was sent by Fatty Chun via encrypted email. The subject line contained only 2 words. It's settled. The attached document is a screenshot of an electronic invitation. It features a deep red background with subtle gold lettering, and in the center is printed Shun Jixing's hypocritical smile and Lin Yan's exquisite yet cold face. The invitation is for 3 days later, the city's most luxurious revolving restaurant, Cloud Pavilion. The theme is signing ceremony for the strategic merger between Shun's group and Shengtong Capital engagement ceremony of Mr. Shun Jixing and Ms. Lin Yan. I stared at the name Lin Yan on the screen, my fingertips lingering on the cold touchpad for a long time. 3 days. Exactly 2 months and 7 days since my release. They were in such a hurry, not only to embezzle that huge sum of money, but also to solidify their legitimacy. Find saves me the trouble of finding a venue. Cloud Pavilion, 200 meters above the ground, floor-to-ceiling windows on all 4 sides. That was the stage they built for themselves, and also the execution ground I chose for them. I didn't reply to Fatty Chun. For the next 3 days, I locked myself in that cheap hotel room, like a precision machine, beginning the final sorting and packaging of the 317 documents. The previous 266 documents were the foundation, the flesh and blood. Now that I needed to forge a spine strong enough to pierce through the heart. I first selected the most crucial recording, the private conversation between Shun Jixing and Lin Yan in the car. Although short, this recording contained several key terms such as framing, conspiracy, and control of an offshore company, and making it direct evidence of Lin Yan's malicious intent. However, I couldn't release the original recording directly, they could easily question it based on claims of editing or forgery. I spent over 10 hours teaching myself audio spectrum analysis and voice print comparison techniques, using professional software to generate a detailed sound wave spectrum, and wrote a 20-page technical appraisal report on audio authenticity, demonstrating the possibility that the recording hadn't been tampered with from multiple dimensions, including sampling frequency, background noise consistency, and format matching. This is document number 267, Technical Appraisal and Legal Applicability Analysis of the Car Conversation Recording. Next, I simplified the money laundering path of the 200 million yuan overseas technology import fee into a clear A4-sized flowchart. Instead of listing cumbersome bank transaction numbers, I used different colored arrows to visually demonstrate how the funds flowed out of the Shun Group, through the offshore company Karitai 3 shell companies, and finally into the Shengtong Capital account controlled by Lin Yan. At key points, I attached corresponding contract copies, bank statement screenshots, and QR codes for business registration information. This is document number 268. A visual graph of the abnormal flow of 200 million yuan from the Shun Group. Next, I focused on processing the evidence regarding Lin Yan's illegal control of the Shun Group's intranet. I packaged the login logs of that anonymous account, IP address tracking records, and data packets exchanged with Shun Jixing's company intranet into an encrypted compressed file with the password set to Lin Yan's birthday. Simultaneously, I drafted a letter of transfer regarding clues of Lin Yan's suspected illegal intrusion into computer information systems and embezzlement, formatted entirely according to standard judicial documents that ready to be sent with a single click when the time was right. This is document number 269, letter of transfer regarding clues of Lin Yan's suspected criminal offenses. Finally, and most importantly, I carefully selected, categorized, and consolidated all the materials, including the previous 266 documents, into a single folder named Clearance. Then, using an anonymous online service, I set up 5 different scheduled sending tasks that each scheduled for the exact hour of the engagement banquet start. The recipients were the Municipal Bar Association's Disciplinary Committee, the Municipal Tax Bureau's Inspection Bureau, several financial media reporters who compete with Shun Jixing, and several influential self-media figures known for their willingness to report on shady dealings, whom Qin Pengzi had found for me. I also registered a new Weibo account that linked it to the backends of these media outlets and planned to simultaneously post a pinned Weibo post with the title, The Collapse of the Clouds, the complete exposure of the Shun Group's massive economic crimes and the involvement of a well-known lawyer in shady dealings. Having done all this, I breathed a long sigh of relief. These 317 documents, like 317 bricks, had now been used to build a staircase leading straight to hell. And I was the demolition expert holding the fuse. On the day of the engagement banquet, I changed into a custom-made suit that I had prepared beforehand, an expensive one, but without any brand logo. It was the only semblance of dignity I had left. I didn't wear makeup or disguise myself. I simply trimmed my hair neatly to make myself look less like a down-on-my-luck person and more like a silent observer. I arrived at the office building where Cloud Pavilion was located 2 hours early. Luxury cars lined the entrance, and bodyguards in black suits, walkie-talkies clipped to their chests, stood solemnly. I mingled among the arriving guests, and no one stopped me. Though my name had once been a stain on my reputation, at this moment that I was just an insignificant passerby. I passed through security smoothly and took the elevator directly to the top floor. The Cloud Pavilion was ablaze with lights, crystal chandeliers reflecting dazzling brilliance. Champagne towers cascaded down, waiters moving among them on trays. Guests, elegantly dressed and chatting, mingled. I spotted Shin Jixing at the head table immediately. He wore a white suit, his hair slicked back, and he was raising a glass to receive compliments. Lin Yan, arm in arm with him, wore a backless white evening gown, a dazzling diamond necklace, and a flawlessly professional smile, though the smile didn't reach her eyes. I stood in the shadows of a corner, a glass of orange juice in my hand, watching them silently. It had been less than 3 months since I last saw her in court. Then she was the judge. Now she was the leading lady about to take the stage. How ironic. Time ticked by. The host took the stage, enthusiastically introducing the Shun Group's illustrious achievements and the profound significance of the merger. Then, Shun Jixing delivered a speech, thanking everyone for their support and outlining a grand vision for the future, his words brimming with self-satisfaction. Next, Lin Yan, representing the legal team, spoke with elegance and logical rigor, emphasizing the legal compliance of the merger and its positive impact on the industry. The audience erupted in applause. I glanced at my watch. 5 minutes to go. I put down my empty glass, straightened my tie, and stepped out of the shadows. My steps were steady, without the slightest hesitation. I walked past the clinking glasses of guests, past the envious glances, and headed straight for the head table. My appearance was like a pebble thrown into a calm lake. At first, only a few people around noticed something amiss and whispered among themselves. Then, more and more people saw me. The noise began to subside, receding like the tide. The host's words caught in his throat. Shun Jixing's smile froze instantly, and the wine glass he held stopped in midair. As for Lin Yan, her pupils suddenly contracted, the color drained from her face in an instant. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. Shun Jixing, who was beside her, suddenly realized what was happening and whispered a signal to the bodyguard next to him. Ignoring the astonished, confused, and even hostile glances directed my way, I walked to the head table just 3 steps away from them. I slightly raised my head, meeting Lin Yan's eyes, which were filled with disbelief and panicked, and a faint smile curved my lips. Congratulations, that I said, my voice not loud, but clearly carrying through the suddenly, deathly silent hall. Congratulations to you both. May your marriage be blessed with prosperity. Shen Jixing was the first to regain his voice. He suppressed the shock in his eyes and shouted sternly, Lu Chun, how did you get out? Security. Throw him out. The two bodyguards behind him immediately stepped forward and reached out to grab my arm. I stood still, simply taking a silver USB drive from the inside pocket of my suit jacket. Under the dazzling crystal chandelier, the drive gleamed with a cold, metallic sheen. I gently placed the drive on the long table in front of them, covered with a pristine white tablecloth, with a soft click. Don't rush. I looked at Shun Jixing, then turned to Lin Yan. On your joyous occasion, how could I not come to offer my congratulations? This small gift is nothing but a token of my respect. I hope you will accept it with a smile. Lin Yan stared intently at the USB drive, as if it weren't a USB drive, but a highly venomous cobra. Her voice trembled slightly, yet she tried to remain calm. Luchin, what nonsense are you spouting? This is no place for you to speak. Security, hurry up. Nonsense. I interrupted her, laughing. The laughter was particularly jarring in the silent hall. Attorney Lin, you call this nonsense? Then I'll show you what real nonsense is. I turned to the stunned guests below the stage and raised my voice. Ladies and gentlemen, today's gathering is filled with distinguished guests, presumably business elites and colleagues from the legal profession. Let me ask you all to bear witness. This USB drive contains some interesting information. For example, how Mr. Shun Jixing laundered 200 million yuan of public funds from the Shun Group into his own pocket through an offshore company called Caritai. How attorney Lin Yan used her professional knowledge to protect these illegal activities, even personally manipulating the internal network and fabricating evidence. And how exactly the irrefutable evidence regarding my embezzlement and infidelity came about. A commotion erupted in the hall. Whispers turned into gasps. People started taking pictures with their phones. Shun Jixing's face turned from white to ashen. His finger pointing at me trembled. You are making false accusations. This is all fake. Whether it's a forgery or not, just plug it into the computer and you'll know. I said calmly, but my gaze was fixed on Lin Yan's face like a nail. Lin Yan, oh, you dare let everyone see it? Don't dare? It's okay, I'll help you. As I spoke, I made a move to grab the USB drive. Shun Jixing panicked completely. He slammed his hand on the table and roared hysterically, don't touch it. Hold him down. Call the police. Call the police now. The bodyguards rushed forward. Just then, Lin Yan suddenly screamed, don't touch that USB drive. Her voice was so shrill, it almost tore through the air. Everyone froze, including Shun Jixing's bodyguard. Lin Yan's face was deathly pale, her chest heaving violently. She clutched the USB drive tightly, as if it were a priceless treasure, or a bomb that could explode at any moment. She looked at Shun Jixing, her eyes filled with fear and resentment. Don't touch it. Inside there's something deadly. Shun Jixing was stunned by the fear in her eyes, his outstretched hand freezing in midair. The guests below the stage erupted in chaos. What was going on? What was on the USB drive? Why was Attorney Lin reacting like this? As I watched this scene, a cruel sense of satisfaction welled up inside me. This was exactly the effect I wanted. Not to present the evidence directly, but to first instill fear. To let their suspicions, panic, and distrust erupt before the truth, right before everyone's eyes. I took a step back, avoiding the bodyguards tugging, straightened my cuffs, surveyed the room, and said loudly, it seems Attorney Lin is well aware of the implications. Fine, since she doesn't dare, I'll try another method. I took out my phone, opened a pre-programmed app, and pressed play. Although the speakers weren't connected, the recording I'd listened to countless times in the cheap hotel room still came clearly from my phone's speaker. As for Lu Chun, I've laid a flawless chain of evidence. He can't overturn the case. But remember that you must transfer control of that offshore company to my name, otherwise I can expose you at any time. Give it away? Then do you still want your lawyer's license? Lin Yan, we're in this together now. Neither of us can survive alone. The recording wasn't long, but in the quiet hall, every word struck like a hammer blow to everyone's heart. At that moment, both Shen Jixing and Lin Yan's faces turned deathly pale. Shen Jixing abruptly turned to look at Lin Yan, his eyes filled with the fury of betrayal. Lin Yan, as if all her strength had been drained, staggered back a step, crashing into a chair, tears welling up unexpectedly, not of sadness, but of utter despair. You really recorded it, she murmured to herself, staring blankly at me, then at the guests around them holding their phones. It's over, it's all over. Like a provoked beast, Shen Jixing ignored me and suddenly raised his hand, delivering a sharp slap to Lin Yan's face. The blow sent her head snapping to the side, a few strands of hair clinging to her bleeding lips. You bitch, he roared. You actually held back this. You wanted to drag me down with you. Lin Yan was stunned by the slap. She covered her face, staring in disbelief at the man she had desperately protected, even at the cost of framing her own husband. This slap shattered all her illusions and the fragile facade between them. Below the stage, flashbulbs went off everywhere, accompanied by suppressed gasps and murmurs. No one paid any attention to me anymore. All eyes were focused on this sudden, internal and external collapse. As I watched this scene, I felt no ecstatic joy at finally getting my revenge, only a chilling calm. I had come to this trap, and I had overturned the table. But this was only the beginning. The 317 documents on the USB drive, and the emails that had been scheduled to be sent were the real feast. I put away my phone, bowed slightly to their chaotic and disgraceful state, like taking a bow after a performance. Then I turned and calmly left Cloud Pavilion amidst the chaos and astonishment. Behind me, I heard Shen Jixing's furious roar and Lin Yan's suppressed, desperate sobs. A good show has only just begun, and I can't wait to see what happens next. The farce at Union Pavilion was like a bomb dropped into deep water. Its aftershocks swept through the city's upper class with devastating force over the next 48 hours. I hid behind the moldy corner of that cheap hotel, coldly observing the raging fire. I had personally started through several secondhand cell phones that were turned on at different times and discarded after use. The first thing to collapse was Shen Jixing's business reputation. My scheduled emails, like a precisely targeted biological virus, quietly spread through the editorial departments of financial media outlets. The visualization of the flow of 200 million yuan was first published by a financial media outlet that had always been at odds with the Shen family, with a shocking headline. Shen Group's shocking scam? 200 million yuan overseas investment is actually self-financing for self-enrichment. Immediately afterward, the Bar Association's disciplinary committee also made its move. A report alleging that Lin Yan was suspected of serious violations of legal ethics, involvement in fabricating evidence, and obstructing judicial fairness circulated online. Although it was quickly deleted, screenshots were already everywhere. I can imagine Shen Jixing's current state of utter chaos without even leaving home. His first priority is dealing with the bank's withdrawal of loans and the default of his partners. Once the 200 million yuan financial hole is publicly questioned, all the creditors will swarm in. And his attempt to quell public opinion is laughably crude and simplistic, holding an emergency press conference denouncing me as a released convict, a madman fabricating lies out of resentment, and claiming he has reported me to the police and will pursue legal action against me. Watching his face contorted with anger and fear on the news broadcast, I couldn't help but sneer. Report me? Investigate me? I'd love for them to investigate. I have backups of all my materials. The transmission path goes through 7 layers of encryption, making it impossible to trace the source. Besides that, I still have that toughest nut to crack, the car recording. The more Shen Jixing jumped up and down, the more his guilty conscience was exposed. But the real drama unfolded between Shen Jixing and Lin Yan. I had long predicted that this alliance built on self-interest and sin would crumble instantly in the face of crisis. Sure enough, the very night after the press conference, an even more explosive video went viral online. The video was blurry, clearly filmed secretly, and the location appeared to be a corner of a private room in a high-end club. In the video, Shen Jixing was yelling at a woman curled up on a sofa. The woman looked up, and there was Lin Yan, her left cheek, still bearing a red and swollen finger mark. Shen Jixing, are you crazy? Is this the time to distance yourself? We should stick to the same story. Lin Yan's voice was trembling with tears, but she was still trying to maintain the last shred of her lawyer's rationality. Unify the story? Tell me how? Shun Jixing kicked over the coffee table, shattering the wine bottle and fruit plate. What else was on that USB drive? You've been rigging things out for that offshore company to have it you? Planning to take it all for yourself? And that recording? Lin Yan, that you actually recorded that. When did you start being wary of me? I did it to protect myself. Lin Yan suddenly stood up, questioning him without regard for his image. If it weren't for that recording, do you think I'd still be sitting here talking to you? Any one of those things that madman Lu Chun produced could have gotten us in jail. Was it wrong of me to hold back? But you're so stupid you can't even cover up a 200 million hold. And now you want to pin all the blame on me? Don't forget who came up with the idea to frame Lu Chun? Where were you when they fabricated the evidence? Now that things have gone wrong, you're quick to distance yourself. You bitch. Shen Jixing was furious and was about to strike again. If you dare touch me again, I'll walk out right now and expose all your shady dealings. Lin Yan screamed, her eyes filled with hysterical madness, including how you laundered that money you embezzled overseas 3 years ago through my offshore company. And how you staged the scene and found someone to take the blame when you hit that child while drunk driving. These words struck me like a thunderbolt. Even through the blurry video and noisy background, they were clearly audible. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't expected Lin Yan to dig up such an old case just to protect himself. This wasn't just a falling out, it was a suicide mission. The video was cut off there, but the damage it caused was nuclear level. A drunk driving cover-up? This is a serious criminal offense, especially one involving death. The internet exploded instantly, with all sorts of speculations and revelations emerging. Shen Jixing's public image completely collapsed, transforming him from a business elite into a heartless criminal. I keenly realized that this was the perfect opportunity to completely destroy them. I immediately sent an instruction to Fatty Chun through an encrypted channel to anonymously package the video along with the scattered clues I had about the drunk driving cover-up incident and send them to several influential self-media figures who specialize in uncovering social scandals, and to hint that they should investigate further in the direction of hit and run and hiring someone to take the blame. Meanwhile, Lin Yan wasn't idle either. Being a top lawyer, her reaction was incredibly swift. The day after the video leaked, she held a press conference to issue a personal statement. Unlike Shen Jixing's furious outburst, she appeared impeccably made up, looking haggard yet composed. She immediately dropped a bombshell. She announced that she was terminating all personal and business relationships with Mr. Shen Jixing, and had voluntarily surrendered herself to the police. She confessed that under Mr. Shen Jixing's inducement and coercion, that she had participated in some financial fraud and evidence forgery. However, regarding other, more serious criminal offenses that Shen Jixing was suspected of, she stated she was unaware of them, but was willing to cooperate with the investigation. This tactic of feigning retreat to advance was extremely clever. She portrayed herself as a vulnerable woman blinded by love and coerced by her domineering boyfriend. Although she admitted to some of the illegal acts, she claimed that turning herself in could earn her a lighter sentence. More importantly, she completely betrayed Shen Jixing, and by adopting an attitude of "I may have been wronged," but he was even worse, she garnered considerable sympathy from a significant number of people. As expected, public opinion began to subtly shift. Some voices began to sympathize with Lin Yan, accusing Shen Jixing of not only being morally corrupt, but also manipulating others through emotions. Shen Jixing was completely isolated and helpless, becoming a pariah. But I know clearly that Lin Yan's surrender was neither a sudden change of conscience nor a simple act of sacrificing a pawn to save the king. In her statement, that she deliberately avoided the issue of actual control of the offshore company and made no mention of the core fact that she participated in profit sharing. She was cutting ties, minimizing her losses, and trying to gain a chance to turn things around in the future with minimal cost. She may even have already prepared for asset transfer and subsequent appeals before surrendering. I absolutely cannot let her succeed. I spent an entire day reviewing all the evidence regarding Lin Yan, especially the offshore company called LY. Previously, I had only proven her connection to the controlling party. Now I need more direct evidence to prove that she is the actual controller, not just a participant. I came up with a breakthrough. Electronic signatures. As a lawyer, Lin Yin would inevitably need to use electronic signatures when handling legal documents for offshore companies. Electronic signatures are often linked to specific hardware dongles or biometric data. I asked Fatty Chun to try and find the digital certificate fingerprint for her signing documents from the cloud backup of Lin Yan's frequently used tablet. Meanwhile, I reanalyzed the car recording. Building on the previous voiceprint comparison, I focused on extracting the oral resonance characteristics and breathing frequency of Lin Yan when she mentioned control of the offshore company, attempting to compare them with her voice in other public settings to demonstrate the specificity of her emotions and physiological state when discussing this core interest, thus corroborating her strong desire to possess the asset. Furthermore, I uncovered a new detail. During the time Lin Yan was framing me, he repeatedly used Shinhixing Company's internal communication system to send encrypted emails. The metadata of these emails, including the sending time, recipient, and even the routing information in the email header, might contain valuable clues. I had Chun Pongzi try to hack into Shinhixing Company's email server backup to attempt to recover the original data of the emails that Lin Yan had deleted. Sure enough, perseverance pays off. In a snapshot of an abandoned test server at Shun Jixing's company, Fatty Chin found several fragments of emails that hadn't been completely erased. Although the content was encrypted, the email headers showed that the sender was Lin Yan's initials, that the recipient was an anonymous email address, and the sending time was around the time of my imprisonment. More importantly, some keywords in the email subject were preserved: LY Trust, beneficiary change. This almost certainly meant that Lin Yan was trying to change the beneficiary of the offshore company to herself. I compiled this new discovery along with my previous analysis of electronic signatures and digital certificates into documents 270 and 271, supplementary chain of evidence regarding Lin Yan's actual control of LY Offshore Company and intended asset transfer. This document is more damaging than any of the previous ones because it directly exposes Lin Yan's lie that she was forced to participate, proving her proactive and greedy nature throughout the entire criminal process. Instead of sending this material immediately, I set a new scheduled task. The sending time was set for the eve of Lin Yan's first hearing at the Bar Association after she surrendered herself to the police. I wanted to deliver this fatal blow head-on to her while she was trying to gain sympathy and secure a lighter sentence. After doing all this, I walked to the window and looked at the gray sky outside. My pale yet unusually calm face was reflected in the glass of the cheap hotel. Shen Jixing was utterly disgraced like a stray dog. Lin Yan was trying to prolong his life by playing the victim and the confessor. But they were both wrong. In this game, there was no leniency that only deserved punishment. I took out the old lighter I always carried with me and lit a cigarette, the only bad habit I developed since my release from prison. Through the swirling smoke, I seemed to see Lin Yan's cold gaze in court again. And hear Shen Jixing's smug sneer. Now it's your turn to taste fear. In the days that followed, I stopped checking my phone so frequently. I knew the storm was brewing. Shen Jixing would be investigated by the police for multiple economic crimes and traffic offenses. His assets would be frozen. And his connections would scatter. As for Lin Yan, in her self-righteous calculations, she would receive the grand gift I had given her. At that time, her carefully constructed defenses would crumble before the overwhelming evidence. The Bar Association hearing would not be her salvation, but only her trial. I stubbed out my cigarette, the sparks flashing briefly between my fingers, like their lives about to fade away. I am no longer the helpless Lu Chun. I am the swordsman. The judge. And my judgment has only just begun. Lin Yan's meticulously planned sob story was completely exposed in the early hours of the 7th day. The scheduled email I set, like the last landmine planted beneath her feet, detonated precisely the moment she stepped through the doors of the Bar Association's disciplinary hearing. This time, instead of using encrypted redirects, I directly used several long-abandoned portal website news release interfaces to publish the full text of the document titled Supplementary Evidence Chain regarding Lin Yan's actual control of LY Offshore Company and intended asset transfer under the name of an anonymous insider. Among the materials, the screenshots of email fragments salvaged from Shun Jixing's abandoned server became the sharpest daggers. especially the email with the subject LY Trust beneficiary changed at its sending time precisely 3 days after my sentencing. At that time that she was still playing the role of a persecuted virtuous wife in public, but behind the scenes, she had already begun to alter the beneficiaries of the offshore trust. The sender's identifier parsed from the email header perfectly matched the hardware identifier of the tablet computer Lin Yin frequently used that which I had previously extracted. This was no longer coercion, but a blatant premeditated embezzlement. Even more devastating was the analysis of the electronic signature. Through technical means, I reconstructed the digital certificate serial number she used to sign the crucial asset transfer documents. This serial number was linked to a high-priced encrypted hardware key under her personal name, and the purchase record was hidden among her bank statements categorized as luxury goods spending. This completely exposed her lie that she was merely following Shun Zhixing's instructions. She wasn't a pawn. She was the mastermind behind the scenes, the partners scheming to monopolize the spoils. The news spread faster than I expected. At the hearing point, one committee member's phone rang first, followed by a second, then a third. Initially, there were suppressed whispers, then accusations and low gasps. Lin Yin sat upright in the witness stand, dressed in a well-fitting navy blue suit, trying to move everyone present with professional terminology and a sorrowful gaze. But when the hearing chairperson, her face ashen, read out the core content of the document and pointed the projector at the several shocking screenshots on the wall, the color drained from her face instantly, even her lips turned ashen. Attorney Lin Yin, the chairman's voice was as cold as ice. Please explain this evidence. Why were emails sent during the period you claim to have been coerced into voluntarily changing the beneficial owner of the offshore company? Why were these documents signed using your personal digital certificate? Lin Yin opened her mouth, a gurgling sound coming from her throat, but no word came out. She instinctively reached for her tablet, only to find that before leaving home that morning, Shun Zhixing's men, under the pretext of cooperating with an investigation, had confiscated all her electronic devices. She had lost her only tool for explanation, and her last chance to fabricate a scene. She looked around. The eyes of her former colleagues were no longer filled with pity, but with disgust, contempt, and even a hint of gleeful schadenfreude. Her professional image and moral compass, upon which she relied for survival, were shattered in that instant. This is a forgery. This is yet another frame-up by that madman Lu Chun. She finally regained her voice, sharp and piercing, and abruptly stood up from her chair. They've taken control of my devices. Even digital certificates can be stolen. That email wasn't sent by me at all. Stolen? An older committee member scoffed, enlarging a projected screenshot of a transaction record. Attorney Lin, this credit card under your name, used to purchase an encryption key that was used the day after your husband went to jail. Could the person who stole your certificate have some kind of premonition, preparing the tools for you a day in advance? Lin Yin froze, as if slapped across the face. She stared intently at the familiar card number and transaction amount on the screen. A supplementary card she'd deliberately used. Point one, she rarely used to cover her tracks. She thought her deception was foolproof, forgetting that in the digital world, every transaction leaves an indelible mark. She opened her mouth, wanting to explain, but found all her words utterly inadequate. Her carefully crafted lie, faced with the irrefutable evidence I presented, was as fragile as a sheet of paper. The hearing spiraled out of control. Committee members stormed out, and reporters swarmed in, their flashbulbs nearly overwhelming Lin Yin. She was scrambling out of the venue by security personnel, and no longer the glamorous, top-tier lawyer, but a suspect accused of serious criminal activity. Upon hearing the news, the Bar Association immediately suspended her license and formally transferred the case to the judicial authorities. If Lin Yan's downfall was a meticulously planned slow torture, then Shun Zhixing's collapse was an unmasked explosion. Lin Yan's hearing scandal was the final straw, crushing his already crumbling business empire. Banks cut off loans, suppliers besieged the company gates, and the negative news he had previously suppressed erupted like a volcano. Even more devastating was that after being exposed at the hearing, Lin Yin completely abandoned all pretense of decency. Knowing she could no longer plead for a lighter sentence through confession, she launched a frenzied counterattack, hoping to atone for her crimes. Through her lawyer, she submitted a supplementary report to the police that dozens of pages long. This report was no longer the previous evasive accusation of ignorance, but a detailed account of Shun Jixing's crimes over the years. From the earliest issue of issuing false value-added tax invoices, to later contract fraud, illegal fundraising, and then to the drunk driving incident where he took the blame for someone's serious injury and fled the scene. It even included a detailed account of how Shun Jixing used an offshore company set up by Lin Yin to launder money when he absconded with funds 3 years ago. Like a drug dealer eager to clear herself of any involvement, she unhesitatingly pinned all the charges on Shun Jixing, even at the cost of implicating herself, all to prove Shun Jixing's status as the mastermind. The most explosive revelation concerns the asset embezzlement case during the restructuring of Shun Jixing's father's state-owned enterprise. Lin Yin confessed that Shun Jixing used a shell company called Xinyuan Trading to embezzle the core assets of the former state-owned enterprise at prices far below market value and forged multiple asset appraisal reports. While the lawyer who signed the forged report wasn't Lin Yin herself, that she knew who it was, her mentor when she first entered the legal profession, that now a powerful figure and vice president of the Bar Association. This not only ruined Shun Jixing, but also exposed a cancer within the judicial system. Lin Yin was determined to go down with him, muddying the waters so she could profit from the chaos. When Shun Jixing learned of this news in the detention center, he was reportedly so enraged that he foamed at the mouth and was rushed to the hospital. He never imagined that the woman he shared a bed with could be so cunning and ruthless. He also never imagined that his past relationship, that which he had always considered a bargaining chip and leverage over others, it would become the sharpest dagger piercing his heart at this critical moment. He began frantically sending messages through his lawyer, attempting to countersue Lin Yin as the mastermind and himself as the victim. He even dug up Lin Yan's old criminal record of fabricating evidence to win a case, but trying to prove that Lin Yin was the corrupt lawyer who habitually manipulated the law and evidence. The public feud between the two, orchestrated by their respective lawyers, that unfolded in the media. One day, Shun Jixing's side released irrefutable evidence of Lin Yan's asset transfers. The next day, Lin Yan's side released a recording of Shun Jixing bribing officials. The once loving couple had become mortal enemies, wishing each other dead. Their mutual accusations were like two boning knives, not only tearing away each other's last shred of dignity, but also exposing the festering sore behind the entire Shun group and the so-called Shangtong capital to the light of day. I watched it all with a cold eye. The television in the cheap hotel played related news 24/7. I saw Shun Jixing being escorted by bailiffs, hooded, only his bloodshot, venomous eyes visible. I saw Lin Yin, though also under control, trying to maintain a pitiful semblance of dignity in each brief appearance, though the ferocity and panic in his eyes could no longer be concealed. They were like two scorpions trapped in a glass jar, frantically tearing at each other until they both succumbed to the poison and died. But I know this isn't enough. Lin Yan's accusations, though vehement, are largely based on exaggerated or selective statements made to protect herself. She's still concealing the core assets of that offshore company and trying to exonerate herself. As for Shun Jixing, even imprisoned, if his assets aren't thoroughly investigated, the wealth he embezzled will eventually become his leverage to overturn his conviction or allow him to continue his wrongdoing after his release. I need to deliver the final, most devastating blow. I need more than just their disgrace. I need their real assets frozen and confiscated, forcing them to spend long years behind bars and completely eliminating any possibility of a comeback. I began organizing the 272nd document. This document no longer focused on a specific crime, but rather provided a panoramic overview and elevated understanding of the entire case. I logically reorganized all 316 previous documents according to timelines, interpersonal relationships, fund flows, and methods of crime. I created a massive relationship diagram covering the entire wall, connecting the names of Shun Jixing, Lin Yin, Shun's father, the vice president, and all other related individuals with different colored lines, marking each person's role and function in each criminal activity. I particularly highlighted Lin Yan's core role in establishing offshore structures, forging legal documents, and manipulating the internal network using bold red arrows to directly link her to the ultimate beneficiaries of the assets, completely shattering her illusion of being an accomplice. Meanwhile, using publicly available information gathered during this period, including court enforcement notices that lists of defaulters and property registration information, that I conducted a thorough investigation of the assets under the names of Shen Zhixing and Lin Yan. I discovered that although Lin Yan had ostensibly transferred most of her assets to offshore companies, she still held multiple high-end properties and a large number of antiques and paintings in China under the names of relatives and friends. Shen Zhixing, on the other hand, controlled several seemingly unrelated shell companies through complex nominee agreements. The shares of these companies ultimately pointed to his several minor children overseas. I compiled these asset leads along with the previous relationship diagrams into a detailed letter of recommendation regarding the recovery of assets and handling of personnel involved in the case of Shen Zhixing and Lin Yan's gang. This letter was rigorously formatted and logically sound. It not only listed the specific assets that needed to be seized and frozen, but also included the corresponding legal basis and evidence index. I even simulated the case handling process of judicial authorities and proposed handling suggestions for different personnel, from the main culprits, Shen Zhixing and Lin Yan, to accomplices, those who harbored criminals, and even the vice president who needed further investigation. This document is the culmination of over 300 of my painstaking efforts. It is the final judgment I prepared for this long journey of revenge. I did not send it directly to the judicial authorities because I know that under the current public pressure and internal investigation pressure, relevant departments will definitely establish a joint task force. I need to choose the most opportune moment to make this document the most powerful weapon in the hands of the task force. And also the final boulder that crushes Shun and Lin. I turned off the television. And the room fell silent once more. The sky outside gradually darkened, and the city's neon lights cast hazy shadows on the floor through the gaps in the curtains. I could almost see on the other side of the city, Shen Zhixing tossing and turning in his cold cell, cursing Lin Yan and me. Lin Yan in the interrogation room, using his last strength to weave new lies. But they didn't know that all their struggles were exactly what I had anticipated. What they saw as a dead end I saw as merely the inevitable path to the end. I picked up the pen and solemnly signed my name on the cover of document number 272, Lu Chun. This time I was no longer the defendant and no longer the victim. But the writer, the one who revealed the truth. I looked at that name. Feeling both strange and familiar. The Lu Chun who was once timid and submissive. Manipulated by his wife, was already dead on the hard bed in prison. What survived was a calm, cruel soul, born solely for revenge. I stood up and stretched my stiff neck. It was time. Tomorrow the joint task force would move in and take full control of the investigation into the Shun and Lin cases. It was time to deliver my grand gift. Shen Zhixing, Lin Yan. Enjoy your last moments of peace in your cages. Because after tomorrow you will face endless darkness and the ultimate judgment I have tailored for you. A judgment called justice. Sending out that weighty letter of recommendation regarding the recovery of assets and handling of personnel involved in the case of Shen Zhixing and Lin Yan's gang was more complicated than I had imagined. I couldn't deliver it personally. I couldn't mail it. And I couldn't even use any traceable electronic signals. I had to make it appear like a ghost on the task force's desk yet remain untraceable. I spent 3 days traveling to different parts of the city, purchasing 5 anonymous SIM cards and 5 of the cheapest secondhand smartphones with cash. Like a paranoid hacker within the coverage area of a long-abandoned public Wi-Fi node, I used one of the phones to split the document into 5 encrypted data packets, uploading each to a different temporary cloud storage space. Then using the other 4 phones at different times and locations I logged into these cloud spaces, downloaded the data packets, and forwarded them to a newly registered, completely anonymous, encrypted email drafts folder. Finally, using a 5th phone I logged into that email, merged the 5 data packets and set it to automatically send them the following morning to the Joint Task Force's publicly announced dedicated reporting email address, as well as the official email addresses of several key investigators. After doing all that, I destroyed all the SIM cards and the phone, throwing the remains into a sewage river 5 kilometers away. I even moved to a more rundown hotel. The receptionist at my previous place thought I had already checked out. I hid myself in the shadows of the city like a spider waiting for its prey to die. The next morning at 10:00 a.m., using a stolen signal receiver that I hid in an abandoned truck 2 blocks away from the Joint Task Force's temporary office, a requisitioned hotel, and intercepted fragments of their unencrypted wireless dispatch signals. I heard a cacophony of commands with several words repeatedly appearing. That anonymous material, the asset list, is very detailed. Immediately freeze all accounts under Xin Yuan Trading's name. Control the properties Lin Yin mentioned. Success. My ghost report arrived as scheduled and immediately drew the attention of the task force. From their urgent instructions, I could imagine the scene. The shock and elation of the investigators as they opened the email and saw the logically sound and well-documented recommendation letter. They didn't need to know who sent the report. They only needed to know that it could help them solve the case quickly and bring Shen Jixing and Lin Yin to justice. In the days that followed, the entire city seemed to have been struck by an earthquake. Police lights flashed, homes were searched, accounts were frozen, and people were taken away for questioning. The shell companies under Shen Jixing's name hidden beneath layers of nominee agreements that were exposed one by one. The luxury homes and paintings purchased by Lin Yin in the names of relatives and friends were sealed off. The vice president of the bar association whom Lin Yin had implicated was also taken from his home late one night. His expression somber. I pieced together the outside world through gossip from the streets and scattered revelations on online forums. Shen Jixing had completely gone mad in the detention center, reportedly screaming at the walls all day, calling Lin Yin a poisonous snake and me a ghost. Lin Yin, on the other hand, was transferred to a worse detention center, and reportedly after an interrogation, he was on the verge of a mental breakdown, repeatedly muttering, "It's all over, everything's over. That person planned it all along." That person. I know she was referring to me. She finally realized that from the moment she walked into the courtroom to commit perjury, she had entered the labyrinth I had meticulously laid. She thought I was a trapped beast, unaware that she herself was the one being hunted. But I know this isn't the end. Lin Yin is too clever, and too afraid of death. She won't give up easily. She must still be searching for a chance to turn things around, even if it's only a 1 in 10,000 chance. And Shen Jixing, though insane, does he still have any remaining power behind him? Among those frozen assets, are there any secrets I've overlooked, or secrets they're trying to protect? I thought of a place, a corner I almost overlooked. Lin Yan's psychological defenses. The reason she's been able to hold out this long in my intricate web of traps isn't luck, but her powerful psychological defense mechanism built on professional arrogance. She always believes she's the rule maker, and I'm just the rule breaker. To completely destroy her, I must shatter this psychological advantage, making her witness firsthand how everything she's so proud of is being dismantled and crushed by me, bit by bit. I decided to set one last trap for her, and for Shen Jixing. A trap that would exploit the irreconcilable hatred and suspicion between them, driving them to kill each other in despair, and ultimately leading to their own destruction. I activated my ghost mode again. This time, my target wasn't the task force, but rather the external channels that Shen Jixing and Lin Yin could access, mainly their lawyers and a very small number of relatives who could still visit them. I fabricated 2 completely different internal documents. The message sent to Shen Jixing was that in order to completely exonerate herself at the hearing, Lin Yin not only confessed to all her crimes, but also fabricated crucial evidence claiming that Shen Jixing had planned to eliminate her 3 years ago and had already hired an assassin waiting to act once she was imprisoned. This evidence even included a fragment of a phone call between Shen Jixing and an unidentified person. The message to Lin Yin was, although Shen Jixing was mentally unstable during a break in his mental evaluation, he secretly slipped a note to the lawyer containing the password to Lin Yan's offshore company's core account. He threatened that if Shen Jixing died or received a heavy sentence, someone would use this password to transfer all the money, leaving Lin Yin with nothing and burdening him with even greater money laundering charges. The note also specifically mentioned that only he and Lin Yin knew the password. And that Lin Yin had personally said it. These two messages were delivered to Shun Zhixing's lawyer and Lin Yan's sister through different anonymous channels. Both messages included a warning. This matter concerns their lives and fortunes. And must be personally and secretly conveyed to the parties involved. Do not leak it. Or you will bear the consequences. I can almost picture their reaction upon seeing the news. Shun Zhixing already harbors deep hatred for Lin Yan. Hearing that she not only turned the tables on him, but also fabricated evidence to try and kill him, his madness will undoubtedly transform into extreme violence. As for Lin Yan, what she cares about most is money and the capital to make a comeback. Hearing that Shun Zhixing is clinging to her lifeline, even trying to take food from her mouth when she is at her weakest, the fear of betrayal and plunder will instantly devour her last remaining sanity. Sure enough, a few days later, the city's evening newspaper published an inconspicuous short news item in its social news section. Detainee assaults police, subdued, and sent to hospital. The content was simple. A male detainee at a detention center suddenly grabbed a guard's service pistol during exercise time, intending to attack him, but was subdued on the spot. He was identified as Shun, suspected of serious economic crimes. Although the accompanying photo was blurred, I recognized the prison uniform. It was Shun Zhixing. The report didn't mention the motive, but I knew it must have been related to the news that Lin Yin wanted to kill him. He was insane, but he wasn't so stupid as to not understand who wanted him dead. Meanwhile, the commotion was even greater for Lin Yin. Her sister left the detention center in a panic after her visit. It said that Lin Yin lost control during the meeting, repeatedly pressing for details about passwords and accounts, even hysterically demanding her sister deal with them immediately, frightening her sister into ending the visit early. Reports indicate that after returning to her cell, Lin Yin began a hunger strike and banged her head against the wall, leading to increased supervision. She wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of poverty, afraid of losing everything and bearing the stigma, afraid that Shun Zhixing could still control her even from prison. Their mutual harm was exactly as I expected. Shun Zhixing tried to eliminate the imagined threat with violence, while Lin Yin self-destructed in fear. But that wasn't enough. I needed the final blow to completely break them down, both physically and mentally, and to let Lin Yin see for herself how utterly and ridiculously she had lost. I found out the specific cell block where Lin Yin was being held. It was a detention center known for its strict management. I couldn't contact her directly, but I could send her things. I went to great lengths to get a brand new, unmarked hardcover notebook and a very ordinary black pen. Then, I locked myself in a hotel room and spent the entire night meticulously and calmly writing in that notebook how I reviewed her chain of evidence from the first day I entered prison, how I discovered the capitalized error in the note code, how I analyzed the lighting in the photos, how I made a deal with Lao Zhou, how I obtained external information through Chun Pongzi, how I set up timed emails, and how I forged those two divisive internal messages. I wrote down every detail, like writing a rigorous investigation report, or like writing a revenge novel. At the end of the notebook, I wrote, Lin Yin, when you see these words, that you should understand that from the moment you said you dared to mess with him, that you had already lost to my logic. Your legal statutes, your sophistry, are utterly vulnerable before that lowercase f that your arrogance made you ignore. You thought you were the player, but you were merely a pawn on my chessboard, destined to be captured because of greed and stupidity. This notebook is my final gift to you. Study it carefully. It will tell you what professionalism is, what revenge is, and why you will die. I didn't sign it, but she wouldn't mistake my handwriting. I slipped the notebook and pen in through a seemingly accidental but actually meticulously calculated loophole, exploiting a lapse in the detention center's inspection process when accepting family members' belongings by tucking the notebook inside a thick, legally permitted publication. I can even imagine her reaction when she received the notebook. First confusion, then shocked. And when she opened the first page and saw that familiar handwriting and the coldly cruel words, her blood would instantly turn to ice. She would read it from beginning to end, each line like a whip lashing at her heart, forcing her to confront the truth she least wanted to admit. She hadn't lost to luck, but to an opponent she had never truly faced, her husband, whom she considered useless. 3 days after I handed over the notebook, I received a message from Fatty Chun through secure channels. It was just a few words. Lin Yin has gone mad. It's true. Apparently after reading the notebook, she laughed and cried in her cell, but then frantically wrote on the walls and floor with the pen I had given her. All my name plus 2 misspelled words. She was diagnosed with acute stress disorder and transferred to solitary confinement in the detention center's medical ward. As for Shen Jixing, after the police assault incident, he was put in heavy shackles and handcuffs. It is said that he has become completely despondent and no longer making a fuss, and just spends his days huddled in a corner with his knees drawn up, his eyes vacant. The vice president who was implicated has also confessed to his crimes. And the case is under further investigation. I stood before the dusty window of the cheap hotel, gazing at the gloomy sky outside. Raindrops began to fall, tapping against the glass with a monotonous sound. 317 documents, like 317 bricks, finally paved a smooth road to hell. Shen Jixing and Lin Yin, one sinking into madness, the other collapsing in despair. They tore each other apart, but ultimately both died in the trap I had prepared for them. I felt neither joy nor relief, only a deep weariness and the emptiness of something finally coming to an end. The flames of revenge had burned too long, too fiercely, and when they finally died down, only cold ashes remained. I looked at my blurry reflection in the glass. The once spirited, certified public accountant was gone, replaced by a stranger with a weary gaze and a hardened heart. I took out the slip of paper with 317 written on it and lit it with a lighter. The flame leaped up, quickly engulfing the numbers and writing on it, finally burning my fingertips. I didn't let go until the burning sensation made me shuddered. Then I released my grip. The ashes fell like black butterflies. 317 documents led to the destruction of 2 people. Was it worth it? I asked myself in the mirror. The person in the mirror didn't answer, only the corner of their mouth twitched slightly. Perhaps a smile, perhaps just a mocking arc. I know my mission isn't completely over. Lin Yin and Shen Jixing may be gone, but their cases still need to be tried, and the assets they embezzled still need to be recovered. I need to reappear in the public eye under a suitable identity. Not as the Avenger Lu Chun, but as a witness, or perhaps a purifier. I packed my meager belongings and took one last look at the dilapidated room I'd lived in for so long. It was time to leave. The rain was still falling, but I knew that sunshine would follow, and my story was coming to an end. The rain stopped. As I stepped out of that cheap hotel whose name I couldn't even be bothered to recall, the air smelled of freshly turned earth mixed with the city's distinctive exhaust fumes. Choking, but undeniably real. I changed into a plain jacket and jeans I'd picked up from a secondhand market. I shaved off the stubble I'd been growing for over 2 months, and cut my hair short. The person in the mirror was pale with sunken eyes, but the flames of revenge in those eyes had been extinguished, leaving only cooled ashes and an almost numb calm. I didn't go to find Fatty Chun, nor did I return to the apartment that I once called home. I rented a single room on the top floor of an apartment in the old town, paying monthly in cash. The landlord was a deaf and blind old man who didn't care who I was, only that the rent arrived on time. I spent these past few days repairing my social relationships, like mending a damaged ledger. I got a new anonymous phone card that registered a new email address, and even went to an inconspicuous community clinic to treat the long-healed but still raised scar on my wrist. The doctor was a quiet, middle-aged man who only asked routinely how I got it. I replied casually I was careless before. He didn't ask any further questions. Stitches, bandages, payment. Everything was done as a procedure. I needed to present myself as a normal person who had just experienced a setback and was trying to start over, not a ghost who had just completed a spectacular revenge. I even went to the job market and picked up a few job postings for accounting positions, even though I knew I wouldn't be back in that industry anytime soon. My name, Lu Chun, was already associated with too many scandals. Even without a conviction, I was already blacklisted in the industry. But that didn't matter. The knowledge and skills I possessed didn't need to be affiliated with a company to be effective. I spent most of my time in that single room on the top floor, quietly observing the outside world through an encrypted communication port left to me by Fatty Chun. The cases of Shun Zhixing and Lin Yan had become a focal point of discussion in the financial and legal circles of this city and even the entire country. The Joint Task Force's investigation was deepening. The downfall of the vice president had uncovered more corruption within the judicial system, even alarming higher levels. Shun Zhixing completely collapsed in the detention center. His mental state was said to fluctuate wildly. When he was in good spirits, he would hold the notebook I had brought in and mutter to himself. When he was in bad spirits, he would bang his head against the wall, cursing Lin Yan and me. He was formally indicted on more than 10 charges, including fraud, contract fraud, embezzlement, money laundering, and the hit-and-run charge exposed by Lin Yan. He almost certainly faced life imprisonment, or even the death penalty. Lin Yan's mental illness became the most controversial part of the case. The psychiatric evaluation went through several rounds of debate with different experts giving drastically different conclusions. Some said it was acute stress disorder, indicating she was criminally responsible. Others said it was post-traumatic stress disorder with psychotic symptoms limiting her criminal responsibility. Still others simply said she was faking mental illness. Her legal team seized on this, attempting to use mental illness as grounds for exemption from criminal punishment or a lighter sentence. Meanwhile, she began to selectively regain her sanity and cooperate with the investigation, but her story completely changed. She no longer admitted to being forced to participate, nor did she claim to have actively reported the crime. Instead, she portrayed herself as a tragic figure who, after discovering her husband's crimes, tried to gather evidence to report them, but fearing retaliation, was forced to feign compliance and even act against her conscience. She even produced some pre-prepared evidence about Shun Zhixing's other misdeeds, attempting to prove she had been undercover all along. This woman is indeed as tenacious as a cockroach. Even at this point, she's still trying to exploit the rules to find a way to survive. She knows about the notebook and knows I possess her core secrets. Yes, she dares not be as arrogant as before, but she hasn't completely given up. She's gambling. Gambling on the judicial system's leniency towards the mentally ill, gambling on public sympathy for her as a persecuted woman, gambling that the special investigation team will accept part of her confession to reduce their workload due to the complexity of the case. She's waiting for an opportunity that, even if she can't escape unscathed, will at least minimize the cost. I cannot let her have her way. Her madness is the greatest desecration of my revenge. She must soberly and thoroughly recognize her defeat and pay the price for her actions. I need to deliver the final blow, not physical destruction, but utter mental strangulation, that she may perish in absolute lucidity. I activated my ghost mode again, but this time my target was more precise. Lin Yan herself, as well as the psychiatric evaluation expert and presiding judge in charge of her case. I didn't need to fabricate evidence. I just needed to present the facts. I spent 2 weeks compiling all the details I had previously gathered about Lin Yan's alleged feigned mental illness into a comprehensive analysis report on Lin Yan's suspected pretending to have a mental disorder to evade legal sanctions. This report does not involve any new criminal facts. Instead, IT analyzes the situation purely from the perspectives of psychology, behavioral science, and logic. I listed inconsistencies in her words and actions in different situations. For example, during her episodes, she could still accurately remember complex account passwords and legal document clauses. During her hunger strike, she would precisely calculate her water intake to sustain life. And although her handwriting on the wall was messy, the stroke order and structure still conformed to her long-term calligraphy practice rather than the disordered handwriting commonly seen in mentally ill patients. I even cited her characteristic deliberately slowed speech and emphasized pauses when she committed perjury in court, comparing them with her language characteristics during her episodes to point out their high degree of consistency. I didn't send this report directly to the investigators. Instead, I divided it into 3 parts. The first part was an analysis of the contradictions in her behavior, which I anonymously sent to the presiding judge in her case, tucked inside an unrelated legal book via regular mail, without leaving any sender information. The second part was an analysis of her handwriting and psychological characteristics, which I compiled into what appeared to be an unpublished academic paper and submitted to a prestigious domestic journal of forensic psychiatry, along with a letter stating that it was a colleague's observation of similar cases and hoping the editorial department would carefully consider similar behaviors in recent related cases. The third part, and the most crucial one, consisted of the complete report, along with details I had previously observed of her desire for money and freedom during the intervals between episodes, compiled into what appeared to be a patient observation diary. I anonymously sent this to the head of the detention center's medical office, implying that the patient behaviors recorded within might aid in differential diagnosis. Having done all this, I felt as if I had sown a few seeds, quietly waiting for them to sprout. I knew these reports themselves couldn't serve as conclusive evidence, but they were like tiny needles pricking the hearts of investigators and forensic experts, making them more wary and suspicious of Lin Yan's performance. The judicial system values chains of evidence and logic. When the seeds of doubt take root and sprout, cracks will appear in Lin Yan's meticulously woven mask of madness. Sure enough, news came soon after. The mental evaluation of Lin Yan had taken a dramatic turn. After multiple reviews and supplementary assessments, the expert panel ultimately issued a majority opinion. Lin Yan was highly likely faking her illness. No clear evidence of organic mental disorder was found, and she was assessed as having full criminal responsibility. The minority opinion held that she might have a personality disorder, but this would not affect her criminal responsibility. This conclusion was undoubtedly the heaviest blow to Lin Yan. The last straw she was trying to grasp had snapped. But Lin Yan did not give up. She began a hunger strike, claiming she had been treated unfairly and would fight to the death. Her lawyers also lobbied extensively, attempting to delay the trial on the grounds of procedural issues and flawed evidence. They even began privately contacting some media outlets, implying that Lin Yan was a victim of power struggles and her husband's revenge, but trying to create public pressure. I knew this was her last struggle. She was trying to gain sympathy by dying, using delaying tactics to wait for things to change. I couldn't wait passively any longer. I needed to give her an irresistible choice, a choice that would completely break her down in her lucid state. Through that encrypted port, I sent Chimpanzee a single command. Tell her I know LY's secondary password and what she hid in the Credit Suisse vault. Chimpanzee quickly replied with a shocked and worried emoji, followed by an understood. I knew that, given Chimpanzee's shrewdness, he would find a suitable way to subtly convey this message to Lin Yan's ears. Perhaps through a lawyer's relay, perhaps through casual conversation among the guards. In short, in a way she could understand but couldn't trace its source. LY is the core code name for that offshore company. The secondary password is the key to unlocking the company's deepest asset vault. Besides Lin Yan, only I, through analyzing her digital footprints and behavioral patterns, was able to deduce the possible combinations. The contents of the Credit Suisse vault are what I inferred from her previous asset transfer routes, where she might store her most critical secrets, such as the original documents of her forged evidence and incriminating evidence against Shun Jixing, and even possibly some shady agency agreements from her early career. I don't have concrete evidence to prove their existence, but I'm betting she's guilty, betting she won't part with those cards that might be her only hope for a future exoneration. Sure enough, the news came back faster than I expected. The next day, Fatty Chin told me that after hearing those words, Lin Yan stopped her hunger strike and began having sleepless nights in her cell. Her eyes no longer held madness, but a deep, undisguised fear. She began frantically demanding to see a lawyer, a prosecutor, and even a lie detector test. She knew that I not only knew her secret, but might also hold the key to completely locking away her future. She wasn't afraid of going to jail, but she was afraid I would destroy her escape route outside the walls. That was the only thing she could still call hope in this world. In the subsequent court hearing, Lin Yan's behavior completely overturned people's impression of her. She was no longer hysterical, nor did she try to play the victim. She became unusually silent, only answering in an almost inaudible voice when asked key questions. She admitted to most of the charges, including fabricating evidence to frame me, participating in money laundering, and assisting Shun Jixing in transferring assets. She abandoned all futile defenses, repeatedly pleading with the court to atone for her crimes and to receive leniency. Her lawyer tried several times to interrupt her, and guide her towards a more favorable defense, but she stopped him with a look. She knew that any defense was futile in the face of the evidence I possessed. She only wanted to use the best possible attitude to obtain my possible confidentiality regarding her secrets. Ultimately, the court delivered its verdict. Lin Yin was convicted of multiple crimes that including fabricating evidence, obstructing testimony, money laundering, and embezzlement, and was sentenced to life imprisonment, deprivation of political rights for life, and confiscation of all personal property. Shen Jixing was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve, deprivation of political rights for life, and confiscation of all personal property. Other related personnel, including the vice president, also received severe punishment under the law. The moment I heard the verdict, I was sitting in my penthouse apartment, watching the sunset outside my window. I didn't turn on the TV, nor did I watch the live broadcast online. I simply sat quietly until it was completely dark. Life imprisonment. For Lin Yin, someone who valued freedom and control above all else, this was more cruel than the death penalty. She would spend the rest of her life behind bars, living each day in regret for losing everything and fear that I might reveal her secrets. And this was the final judgment I had given her. I felt no satisfaction at achieving my revenge, only a sense of emptiness, as if the dust had settled. I picked up the remnant of the 317 paper, burned to a corner, and gently crumbled it, letting the powder fall through my fingers. 317 documents, their mission accomplished. I stood up, walked to the window, and watched the hurried crowds on the street below. Who among them knew that the recent upheaval in this city stemmed from the revenge of a man they considered worthless? They didn't care, they only cared about their own lives. It's time for me to care about my life. I took out a new sheet of paper, wrote down a new name, and a few simple plans. Revenge is over, life is just beginning. But this time, I'm no longer a pawn to be manipulated, nor am I a demon wielding revenge. I'm simply Lu Chun, trying to reclaim my life. As for the past, let it be buried forever in those 317 documents. Life imprisonment. These 3 words, like a cold tombstone, finally stood at the end of Lin Yan's life, and also at the end of my path of revenge. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. On the day of the sentencing, I simply shut down the encrypted port that had been used for too long, formatted the secondhand laptop, and poured the charred remains of the 317 note, along with all the analytical drafts, deductive reasoning, and even the electronic backup of the ghost notebook that recorded Shen Jixing and Lin Yan's final madness, into a pre-prepared plastic bucket filled with a highly corrosive solution. The liquid churned, bubbling, the paper quickly blackened and curled, finally turning into an unrecognizable pool of ink. The characters on the screen disappeared line by line under the delete command, like a barren beach exposed after the tide recedes. After finishing all this, I opened the window, letting the faint smell of chemicals in the room dissipate. The early winter wind rushed in, carrying the city's characteristic chill, making my thin shirt cling tightly to my body. I stood by the window, looking down at the perpetually murky pond below, its surface covered with a thin layer of ice, reflecting fragmented light in the pale sunlight. In the distance, the pile drivers at the construction site emitted a dull, rhythmic thud, one after another, like some unchanging beat, reminding us that the world continues to function even without someone. In the days that followed, I was like a drop of water merging into the ocean, completely disappearing into the bustling city. I moved out of that top-floor single room and rented a more remote and dilapidated courtyard in the old city center in the north with cash. The courtyard was small and cluttered with miscellaneous items, but there was a half-withered pomegranate tree, its branches gnarled in winter, much like my current state of mind. I stopped paying attention to any news, canceled all subscriptions I could, and even uninstalled the few news apps I had on my phone. Like an ascetic, I cut off all unnecessary contact with the outside world. Occasionally, I would go to the nearby vegetable market and join the old ladies haggling over a few cents, picking out the freshest vegetables. Or I would sit on a park bench for half a day, watching toddlers learning to walk and elderly people exercising in the cold wind. Their faces showed the most basic desire to survive, without calculation or conspiracy, only the hardship and resilience of living itself. This authenticity gave me a long-lost peace. I began to reorganize my life, or rather learn how to live like an ordinary person. I went to the community library and borrowed the latest textbook on basic accounting, not to study for an exam, but to rediscover the feeling of purely dealing with numbers. I learned to cook, starting with burning a bowl of porridge, and gradually progressing to being able to stir-fry a plate of vegetables. I even kept a cactus on the windowsill, requiring little care, yet it stubbornly grew in the barren soil. These trivial, meaningless daily routines, like fine sand, gradually filled the huge void in my heart, a void carved out by hatred. Sometimes I would have a fleeting feeling that Lu Chun, betrayed by his wife in court and recounting his conspiracy in prison, was just a character I had fabricated in some long nightmare. But the pale white scar on my wrist, and the cold sweat that occasionally woke me uncontrollably in the middle of the night would mercilessly pull me back to reality. This near-secluded life lasted for almost half a year, until one spring afternoon I received a letter without a sender's address and with an ordinary stamp. The letter was sent to my rented courtyard by regular mail. The envelope was somewhat worn, and the edges showed signs of rain. I recognized the handwriting. Although the strokes had been deliberately altered, the underlying structure and the natural flow of the characters still belonged to Lin Yan. I stood by the window for a long time, holding the letter. The pomegranate tree was sprouting a few new buds, their tender green almost blinding. I finally opened the letter. Inside was only a thin sheet of paper, of the same rough texture, with handwriting in blue ballpoint pen, the color pale, some parts torn from too much pressure, but conveying a trembling sense of despair. The letter was very short, with no salutation and no signature. Lu Chun. Seeing these words is like seeing the person in person. They said I still have an appeal period, but I won't appeal. Life imprisonment, that's fine. At least it's better than dying in a mental hospital. You guessed it, that vault in Switzerland. It contains the most shameful thing I've ever done, my only escape route. Thank you for not revealing it. Although I know you didn't speak out of pride, not pity, I accept that pride. I often think of the USB drive you handed me in court, and your calm, almost cruel voice. Only then did I realize that what I lost to you wasn't the law, nor logic, but the human heart. I trusted rules and skills too much, forgetting that rules are made by people, and the human heart is the most unreliable thing. I used the rules to manipulate people's hearts, but in the end I was destroyed by your calm understanding of human nature. That bed photo, I chose it. The mole on that woman's earlobe was added by the makeup artist. I deliberately used curtains from Hentang International, because I knew you would notice. I thought it was a flaw, a way to make you make a mistake in your anger, but unexpectedly, it became the starting point for your counterattack. How ironic. And that lowercase f. I checked it countless times, yet I still missed it. I mocked your mediocrity, forgetting that the devil is often in the details. And you are that devil that crawled out from the details. I no longer hate you. To hate you would be to admit that I lost and was unwilling to accept it. I just regret. Regret for choosing the wrong opponent, and even more regret for underestimating the heart of the person beside me. Don't look at me. Your appearance reminds me of everything I once had, but which I destroyed with my own hands. May you be well in a world without me. A person who has finally learned to shut up. At the end of the letter, there was a small, inconspicuous smudge, like a drop of water that had fallen and been quickly absorbed. Was it a tear, or raindrops from outside the window? I didn't know. I placed the letter on the table, not folding it, just letting it lie open. The sunlight moved, illuminating the uneven pen marks on the paper. I read it several times, without anger, without pleasure, without even a ripple of emotion. Every word in the letter was like a sigh drifting from another time and space, separated from me by an invisible pane of glass. She finally admitted defeat, acknowledged my existence as an opponent, even admitted her regret. But what did it matter? Regret cannot rewrite history, and an apology cannot undo the damage. Her pain, her realization, were long since irrelevant to me. I picked up the letter, went to the kitchen, and watched the lit gas stove curl to char and finally turn into a handful of light ashes, which I scattered out the window into the wind. A spring breeze blew, and the ashes vanished instantly, without a trace. Just like her, once so radiant, but ultimately nothing more than a handful of dust easily forgotten. I felt no lingering attachment, no looking back. I went back into the room and took out my wedding photo with Lin Yin from the depths of a drawer. In the photo, she smiled confidently and brightly, while I stood honestly beside her, my eyes full of admiration. I once thought that was the beginning of happiness. Now it seems that it was just a corner of a carefully arranged stage. And I was the most suitable prop she chose. Looking at the once familiar self in the photo, I suddenly felt a sense of estrangement. That Lu Chun was already dead on the hard bed in prison. The one who is alive now is a stranger, reshaped by hatred, yet slowly having his wrinkles smoothed out by time. I picked up a pen and wrote a date on the back of the photo, the day I was released from prison. Then, without hesitation, I tore the photo in half. I threw her half into the trash can. I looked at my half for a long time, and finally, I casually tossed it into the wastebasket next to me. I didn't want any memories, neither hatred nor the false love of the past. What I wanted was complete cleanliness. I resigned from the rented courtyard house without telling anyone. I paid the last month's rent in cash, leaving the cactus I'd nurtured for half a year on the windowsill. It had sprouted a small, pale yellow bud, but I couldn't wait for it to bloom. I moved to a different city, a small coastal town in the south, with a mild climate and evergreen vegetation. I found a job doing basic accounting at a small accounting firm, no office hours, just regular report submissions. My colleagues were very polite, almost distantly, which suited me perfectly. After work, I would stroll along the seaside boardwalk, watching the sunset paint the sea a magnificent orange red, listening to the tireless waves crashing against the rocks. Here, there was no shunzihixing, no lin yan, no 317 documents, and no target for revenge. Only the sea breeze, the sunset, and noise irrelevant to me. Sometimes, in the dead of night, when no one is around, I think of Lao Zhou. I wonder how he's doing. His skill in forging documents is probably becoming increasingly difficult to counterfeit with today's anti-counterfeiting technology. Perhaps he's been released on parole, or perhaps he's still in jail. I hope he's doing well. After all, during those dark days, he was the one who gave me my initial inspiration and a faint connection. But this thought will remain just that, a thought. I won't go looking for him. The past should stay in the past. I sometimes think of Fatty Chin too. He's probably back to his routine life by now, maybe occasionally bragging about how he helped a friend who'd been to jail, but he'll forget about it soon after. That's for the best. He deserves peace and happiness. As for Lin Yin, I later learned of her formal imprisonment by chance from a brief legal news report. The news article had no pictures, only a cold line of text. I closed the page without looking at it again. She had completely disappeared from my world, along with that night, when you dared to mess with her, and those 317 pieces of material soaked in hatred. She became a footnote in my life, a warning, but no longer the center. My new apartment is small, but it has a south-facing balcony. I've planted a few pots of mint and basil on it, and they're thriving, emitting a delicate fragrance. I've started to enjoy cooking, trying different recipes, even though I mostly eat alone. On weekends, I go to the local library and read books unrelated to my major, history, geography, even gardening. I've discovered I've developed an interest in botany, those silent lives following their own rhythms, not competing or striving, yet possessing their own strength. One day, while tidying my bookshelf, a bookmark fell out of a borrowed gardening book. It was a simple cardboard bookmark with a line of poetry printed on it. If the heart is imprisoned, the whole world is a cage. If the heart finds peace, even a humble dwelling is paradise. I held the bookmark and stood by the window for a long time. The warm sunlight shone on me, and the sea breeze stirred the curtains. Suddenly, I understood something. True revenge isn't about destroying the other person, but about freeing oneself from the cage of hatred and regaining inner peace and freedom. I did it. I used 317 pieces of evidence as weapons, but ultimately, what redeemed me wasn't the cold, hard evidence, but the passage of time and my renewed acceptance of ordinary life. I no longer dwell on who I was in the past, nor worry about who I will become in the future. I am who I am, an ordinary person who has experienced the deepest darkness and ultimately chose to walk towards the light. Lin Yin and Shen Jixing are still behind bars, spending the rest of their lives chewing on their sins and regrets. But I have already acquired a wealth they can never attain. A brand new life where I need no pretense, no scheming, and only to be responsible for myself. I tucked the bookmark back into the book and put it back on the shelf. Then I turned and went into the kitchen to prepare dinner. The water in the pot was boiling, steaming. Outside the window, dusk was falling, and the city lights were coming on. Beneath each of those lights, a story was unfolding. And my story finally turned the heavy page and began its simple yet real sequel. There were no climaxes and no plot twists, only the ordinary routine of day after day. And this was the happiness I longed for most after all the hardships I had endured.